Good evening and oops, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Good evening and welcome. This is the February 23rd, 2022 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses, including plan developments, zoning relief, and appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will either make a final determination or send its recommendation to City Council. Would the staff please call the roll?
All right. Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Hugo?
Here.
Commissioner Linwall?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Mordinchev would not be here. Commissioner Zordan? Commissioner Westerberg?
Here.
Commissioner Cullen?
Present.
Commissioner Halleck?
Here.
And Commissioner Aravalo?
Here.
Okay.
Okay, so with 9 members present, we do have a quorum. Also present tonight from city staff, our neighborhood and land use planner, Megan Jones, planner, Katie Ashbaugh, our zoning administrator, Melissa Klotz, assistant city attorney, Brian George. I believe Director Neiden is not with us this evening. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. This is a formal hearing and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time, so all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will have the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Commissioners may ask questions at any time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. After that, persons wishing to make a statement regarding the matter will have a chance to do so. Any person with a legal interest in property located within the defined notification requirements of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony and statements have been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the commission will close the record and begin deliberations to consider the standards. The commission will make formal findings of fact based on the testimony and evidence presented, guided by the standards, the commissioner's knowledge of our community, and the recommendation of staff. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and corresponding staff memorandum. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record. And the way we're doing it on Zoom tonight is if you just raise your hand if you haven't signed up, and I'll get to you when we get to the public testimony portion of the evening. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure your microphone is turned on when you're asking questions or making statements so that you can be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We do have a full agenda this evening. We have one item that is old business, and we have 4 items that are new business. I'm just going to take a quick count here to make sure everybody is present. We don't need to have anybody here from 1414 Church, so I'm going to skip over that one because all we're doing is recording votes for commissioners who were absent during the last meeting. Is the applicant for 1224 Washington Street present?
Sorry, yes.
I see you there trying to unmute yourself. So the
Yeah.
applicant for 1706 through 10 Sherman Avenue?
Yes.
Thank you. The applicant for 2356 Colfax Terrace?
Yep, we're here. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the other issue is a staff directed text amendment. So staff will be presenting that one. At this point, I'm going to ask anybody who thinks they may be speaking to us on any matter this evening to please turn on your cameras so I can see you raising your hands so I can swear you in. And I'll give you a moment to do that. All right. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we will move into our agenda. The first item on our agenda is the approval of our meeting minutes from February 9th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll move to approve.
Lindwald moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Westerberg seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Pictou,
Yes.
Commissioner Hugo,
Abstain.
Commissioner Linwall,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Abstain.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Cullen,
Abstain.
Commissioner Halleck,
Yes.
and Commissioner Arevalo. Commissioner Arevalo,
Abstain.
All right. I will note for the record that we have, what was your count on the total there?
I've got 4 abstentions.
Which would make 5 yeses.
Yes, so we should be good.
Okay, so the meeting minutes are approved with 5 yeses and 4 abstentions. And for the record, I'll note the people who abstained are people who were not at that meeting and therefore cannot verify the record. The next item on our agenda is a matter of old business. We have to have a majority number of our members, whether they are present or not, have to vote in the affirmative or denial for a motion to either be passed or denied on a matter in which we are a determining body. Currently, we have for 1414 Church 22 ZMJV 0002, an open vote of 2 votes in favor and 5 opposed. I note for the record that Commissioner Arevalo, Cullen, Hugo, and Johnson were not present at that meeting. So at this point, I'm going to ask them if they could please certify for the record that they have read the draft minutes and or watched the video recording and are aware of the documents and testimony that was presented at our last meeting.
Yeah.
I have. Yes.
All right. So at this point, Ms. Jones, if you will call the roll for those 4 members who were not present. Commissioner Cullen has her hand raised. Is there something you're raising your hand for, Commissioner?
You are muted, Commissioner Cullen.
I just want to know if you guys could repeat the motion as it was proposed with the condition.
I'll have to go to the minutes to get the exact motion as it was. We don't have the exact motion, but I believe that the motion which was made by Commissioner Lindwall, if I'm correct, was for approval of the variations that were requested for 1414 Church, provided that they were in compliance with the testimony and documents that were submitted at that meeting.
Were there any conditions?
There were no specific conditions placed on it, no.
Okay.
All right. So Ms. Jones, if you will call the roll for those members.
Okay, Commissioner Hugo,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Cullen,
Yes.
and Commissioner Arevalo.
No.
So I have a vote of 4-7 and the motion fails. So the zoning relief sought is not granted. And so the applicant can talk with staff if they want to come up with a different type of proposal for the property that they'd like to try to bring back to us at some point in the future. But as of right now, the motion for 1414 Church has failed on a 4-7 vote. And with that, we will move into new business. And I believe Ms. Ashbaugh is presenting for 21 ZMJV 0100 for 1224 Washington Street. Is that correct?
Yes, so
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go.
Would you please read it into the record before we begin discussion?
Oh, yes, my mistake. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have too many tabs open. Okay. This is a public hearing for the property located at 1224 Washington Street, zoning case number 21 ZMJV-0100. James Tullio, property owner, requests various zoning variations from the Evanston zoning ordinance to allow for the subdivision of one 9,226 square foot, 100-foot wide lot, residential corner, 100-foot wide residential corner lot into two residential lots in the R3 two-family residential district. The zoning relief requested is as follows: to allow both the proposed corner and interior lots to be 4,613 square feet, where a minimum of 5,000 square feet is required for a single-family residence, section 6-8-4-4. To allow the proposed corner lot a building lot coverage of 2,090 square feet, or 45.3%, where a maximum of 2,076 square feet is permitted, section 6-8-4-6. To allow the proposed corner lot an impervious surface lot coverage of approximately 3,600 square feet, or 78.04%, where the maximum permitted is 2,767.8 square feet, or 60% is permitted, section 6-8-4-9. And finally, a 2.8-foot interior side yard setback for an accessory structure, an existing patio, where 5 feet is required per section 6-8-4-7, subparagraph C3. The subject property is currently improved with one 2-story building, a driveway and patio. The Land Use Commission makes a final determination on these requests per section 6-3-8-10 of the Evanston zoning ordinance and ordinance 92-0-21. The city council shall consider the draft plat of subdivision per section 4-11-1 of the Evanston Building Code, should the Land Use Commission approve the aforementioned variations from the Evanston zoning ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Ashbaugh. You can go ahead now with your presentation.
All right, so this is going to be just a brief presentation to cover the prior request from the applicant that the Land Use Commission considered on January 12th, 2022. He has come forward to the Land Use Commission again this evening with a revision to that proposed 2-lot split in response to the comments received from the Land Use Commission on January 12th. So this evening, the applicant's asking for these variations. There's a total of 5. 1 per lot for the lot size, and then the other 3 are for the corner lot. So to refamiliarize anyone that was not present on the 12th or anyone new to the public, this is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Washington Street and Asbury Avenue. So it is a corner lot, and it's in the R32 family residential zoning district. So this is the proposal that the Land Use Commission considered. The applicant, with some guidance from staff, originally requested two variations. One, to allow the interior lot, or lot 2, to be 4,226 square feet. And then a second variation for impervious surface lot coverage for the corner lot, or lot 1. Lot 1 was proposed as compliant with the R3 minimum width and size standards. After receiving the feedback from the Land Use Commission on last month, the applicant has worked with staff to revise the variations requested and the intent, the feedback that was received from the Land Use Commission was to make both proposed lots closer to compliant with the 5,000 square foot minimum. So that would result in two 50-foot wide lots, and they're both would be the same size at 4,613 square feet. So both lots would then require a variation each from the minimum lot size. And then the existing conditions of lot 1, where the current 2-story building is located in the driveway to the south, there would be a building lot coverage variation, impervious surface lot coverage, and then there's an existing concrete patio to the east of the existing building. And he would need a variation to allow that to be closer than 5 feet to the lot line. Following some discussion from the Design Project Review Committee, this proposal did receive a positive recommendation. And there are some conditions of approval that were outlined in the staff report, which I can pull that up if we'd like to refer to it. And then another item that the Land Use Commission wanted to see was some possible building footprints of what it would look like if the lots were more equal in size. So the lot 1, it's important to note that along Asbury, the east frontage requires a 15-foot street side setback. So that's why it's shifted farther. And it is also kind of maintaining that existing front yard because the average of the existing front yards is what the required front yard is, rather than 27. So lot 2, this particular footprint, there is room to the east of the building footprint to put a driveway connecting to the detached garage to the rear. However, one of the conditions of approval from the Design and Project Review Committee was to prohibit a curb cut from this lot. So they noted that this also would just exacerbate any concerns with regard to impervious surface, having a driveway going the length of the property. So this is the second possible outcome. The lot 2, the building footprint is much larger than the maximum permitted building lot coverage. That's just the building envelope. So the house could sit somewhere within that in compliance with the 5-foot interior side yard setbacks. And then it has a lesser front yard setback. And then note also the easement would then allow access to that detached garage on lot 2. Have the standards up for reference, but those are my slides. That's all I have, and hopefully that brings everybody back up to speed with this request.
Thank you, Ms. Ashbaugh. Yeah, so this was a case that we heard at our first meeting, and we had given some direction based on that initial hearing about how we would like to see the lots more equally divided was the wish of some of the commissioners, and other commissioners like Ms. Ashbell had mentioned were concerned about how to access parking on the newly created lot. With this, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tullio and just ask him if he would like to speak briefly. We have kind of the history of this lot. I think most of us were present last time. So if you just kind of want to talk to us just briefly about this new proposal, and then we will take any other testimony that needs to be taken and deliberate the case.
Well, there's not a lot to say. I met with the planning committee last week, and they approved it for their recommendation. The one thing they requested is that
I think you froze. I think we lost Mr. Tullio for a moment. Is there a way, Ms. Jones, that you can like remove him and maybe ask him if you have a number to text or call and ask him to rejoin us?
Just waiting on him to rejoin.
Okay.
I also just sent him a quick email to let him know he was booted so he can get back in.
There he is.
I don't know what happened. It just disappeared.
You froze up on us. So go ahead and tell us about your project. We didn't get too far into it. You'd met with Dapper for their
Yes,
approval.
yes. And they voted 8-3 in favor of doing this. And I was just saying that one of the conditions, there wasn't that many, but one of the conditions was that I get rid of the patio, the concrete patio. So we have more actual land for drainage reasons. And I agreed to do that, and that's not a problem.
And then there was discussion about an easement. And is that, if that's the route we would decide to go, does that create any problems for you?
No, but the more I was looking at it, I mean, I would take out the bushes, and that I have no problem doing that, but I'm still not sure 2 cars will fit through there. It's almost 17 feet wide. It's going to be pretty tight. So I don't know.
At 17 feet, because a typical parking space is, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, 8 feet wide for a
It is.
pull-in.
8.5 feet wide is the minimum width.
Okay, so that puts us right at what we would need for a parking space for 1224 Washington, and then a drive-through to the next space. So I don't have concerns about that.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Tullio?
No.
Are there questions from commissioners? I saw Commissioner Halleck. Oh, you're muted, Commissioner.
Okay. One question on the impervious surface. If the patio is removed, what would the impervious surface area be, and would it be in compliance, or how close to the max would it be?
First, I'd like to clarify the condition of approval was that he could then replace the concrete with permeable pavers.
Okay.
So
and
it would
that does
still
not count as impervious, right? So
it does, but just with the reduced rate, brick pavers would be have a 20% deduction. So but permeable pavers in the code have a 25% deduction. So like 100 square feet counts as 75 square feet. So that was the actual condition. I did not do the calculation of how much the impervious surface would actually be reduced, but I can do that
I
rather
think the-
quickly during the discussion.
Okay, I understand the recommendation, but it sounded like the applicant either understood it or voluntarily is going to remove the patio. So do you know if the patio was removed, how close to the impervious surface, max, would it be?
I did not do that analysis, but I can.
Okay, Ms. Ashbell, while you do that, I'll ask if there are other questions of the applicant from commissioners. Anyone? All right, I'm not seeing any questions from commissioners. So Mr. Tullio, is there anything you would like to say in summation?
I mean, nothing that I haven't said before, unless you want me to repeat myself.
You don't need to repeat yourself. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I think almost every commissioner was at that first meeting, if I'm not mistaken. So I think a lot of us are familiar with this property. I'll ask then if there are any members of the public who wish to address the board regarding 1224 Washington. If you would raise your hand, please. And I'm not seeing any hands going up. So Ms. Ashball, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how quickly are you figuring numbers?
Just one more minute, please. I apologize.
That's fine. What we'll do is we will go ahead and close the record then. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Lindwall has her hand up.
I've got a couple of questions for staff, but that can happen after you close the record, I expect, unless you'd rather have me ask them now.
We'll go ahead and close the record. If it becomes necessary to reopen the record, we can always do that, but we'll go ahead and close the record and begin our discussion that way. So with that, I will close the record and ask commissioners just general thoughts on the proposed project. Realizing that we still have an outstanding question, and Commissioner Lindwall, I'll turn it over to you to start with so you can begin questions for staff.
Okay, thanks. I'm very concerned about the cross-access easement and kind of how that would work and creating a viable, sellable second lot if you prohibit the access off of Washington. And I guess my questions, I understand the desire to reduce the amount of pavement, by having a rear garage on the second lot. But if I read correctly, am I correct in that the access to the second lot would have to be hard surface at some point? And that, and just looking at that dimension, that's 50 feet of paved surface at, 8.5 feet or 8.42 feet, which I think is really awfully narrow for a, trying to have an access drive that narrow width going to the second lot. And I guess my question is, did you consider the possibility of a front-loaded garage off of Washington for the interior lot, which would not require anywhere near the wouldn't need to be paved the full length of the lot? I'm not a huge fan of front-loaded garages, but there are lots of examples in Evanston, and they can be designed to kind of minimize the impact. So that's kind of my broad question as to how whether or not anyone would be really willing to purchase a lot for a single family home where the only way to access it is with a, less than an 8.5 foot wide driveway to get to their, their lot. So I guess that's kind of a question of staff that I'd like to get some response from, and other commissioners as well.
You're
Sorry,
muted.
Ms. Ashbell.
So I do have an answer to the first question about impervious surface. So the existing patio is around 450 to 460 square feet. So it would reduce the impervious surface of lot 1 to about 68%. So that, I guess, about 10% of a reduction if it's removed.
And 45 is what is permitted, correct?
45 is building and 60 is impervious surface.
60 is
65 is impervious surface.
65 is impervious. Okay, that's right. We're in an R3.
So for me, the bottom line is it becomes very close then to the impervious surface requirement. Okay.
Yes.
Correct. And the impervious surface calculation that's was noticed for does assume the required hardscape for the driveway. So that if only the patio is removed, that with the lower line parallel to the south facade of the building, and then everything north is removed, that concrete, it would be, that's about 450 to 460 square feet. So again, the calculation was assuming that the driveway would in fact actually be completely hardscaped in compliance with zoning code. So did you have any other follow-up questions, Commissioner Halleck? Okay. Commissioner Lindwall, we did not really evaluate the site design with regard to a front-loaded garage. I think the Design and Project Review Committee, there was not any interest in entertaining a curb cut on Washington whatsoever. They did not. They felt that with the conditions that are recommended with this, should it be approved, if we're prohibiting any future variations from being granted, particularly as they pertain to impervious surface, having that additional pavement in the rear would be a problem. The front-loaded garage, I'm sure that could definitely be feasible. We can mock something up if you'd like to see that, but that was not something we really evaluated and internally.
Yeah, no, my concern is that, if you've got the impervious surface along lot 1 to get to lot 2, there's still going to need to be additional impervious surface to have access to wherever a garage would be located on the site. So suddenly, you're probably at, at least probably 60 feet of additional pavement. And granted, it can only be like 8.5 feet wide. But that would seem to be kind of equivalent to having a driveway off of Washington to the rear of the lot. Even I'm not sure, I'm not sure that you're gaining anything by prohibiting a curb cut on Washington and making it as a condition. And I think that I think that it would be difficult. I don't think that the lot will be as valuable if only access is off of this easement, which I would presume that would need to be recorded as a condition of the subdivision. I mean, nobody's going to buy a lot where the conditions say that you can't have any variations. So that's one of my concerns.
Understood. I guess if the patio is in fact removed though, he's only requesting 3% above the maximum permitted impervious surface, or no, actually not 3%, 8%. So he's still reducing it. And I haven't done the math yet, but he could also still do permeable pavers for the driveway as well, which would be somewhat of a reduction.
Yeah.
But
Well, no, I'm concerned about the impact or the amount of pavement that would need to happen on lot 2. When it's developed, and whether or not this condition is really, minimizing, if it's a significant reduction than what might otherwise happen.
All right. Any other questions, Commissioner Lindwall? No? Okay.
Not at this moment.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Westerberg has her hand up.
Just a question for staff. Are there other front-loaded garage dwellings on that block? Or would it be a significant variation in the streetscape to have a front-loaded garage on that second parcel?
I personally did not evaluate the block streetscape, but I'm happy to do so. And we can follow up.
I can jump in. I'm looking at an aerial view right now, and it looks like on the north side of Washington Street, a couple properties to the east, 3 or 4 properties to the east, it looks like there's a driveway, I think. Yes. Other than that, on the south side of Washington Street, just 3 lots over, there's Pope John the 13th school, and they have at least 1 driveway, maybe 2. So it looks like there are a few, but not a ton.
A quick question for staff. So a curb cut, who approves a curb cut?
It is a permit that the community development department issues, but it's also routed to the public works staff. So they would also have to sign off on it.
Okay, and are they the ones who are pushing against having the curb cut?
Was more of both departments at the
Okay.
Sign Project Review Committee.
Okay. Commissioner Fuchtel?
Yeah, I believe it's part of the current comprehensive plan that the city's goal is to minimize curb cuts.
Yeah, I know that. I just was curious as to what the, if we were putting conditions on that sort of stuff, who we were putting those conditions on. Are there any other questions? Comments, thoughts? Okay, if not, we do have 7 standards that we must find are met in order for us to approve, or for us to approve, we must find that they are met. And I will run through those standards and ask commissioners to please weigh in if you feel that I'm in error, or if you have something that you would like to add on to that, maybe as a condition or something like that to bring it into compliance. Number 1, and these standards are in 6, 3, 8, 12, the standards for variations. Number 1 is the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. I believe that this standard is met. We do find a number of smaller lots scattered throughout the city that do not meet our existing code, because we applied code onto existing properties. So in the south end of town, in the 8th and 9th ward, it's not unusual to find lots. I just did a quick search of some of the lots around this area, and there are many lots that are even smaller than the proposed lots would be here. And I think that the greatest impact is going to be on these 2 properties and the property that is to the east of them. And we've not heard anything from the property owner to the east stating that they feel that this will somehow impact them substantially. So I believe this standard is met. The requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. I would say that this standard is also met. Each property that we're proposing here is about an 8% minimum, or 8% below what the minimum required lot size would be, and would also allow for another single family home to be built in this neighborhood. And so I believe that that standard is met and is in keeping with the zoning ordinance.
Chair Rogers?
Yes.
I think it might be helpful if, because are you accepting all of the conditions that staff has proposed, or?
We will get to those when we go through
Later.
the standards, and we'll discuss which ones we want to apply and which ones we do not want to apply.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's something that you want in addition to what staff has recommended, feel free to throw that out at this point.
More a matter of I would take some away, I think.
Okay,
I
and that's
also,
why I want to kind of wait till the end.
okay, and then I think I just have a problem with, I guess it's standard 2. I don't think it's a good idea to be not following the minimum lot size requirements for subdivisions. I think it creates a precedent that is problematic. So I think for standard number 2, I don't think that one is met from my perspective.
All right, thank you. Standard number 3, the hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. The problem, I believe this standard is met. The fact is that we have a lot that is larger than most of the other lots, but smaller than what can be subdivided to create 2 compliant lots. But I think that since the current lot cannot be increased in any way to get us to that 10,000, which allows for a subdivision of 2 equal 5,000 lots. And again, because of the fact that we're so close, I believe this standard has been met. The property owner, number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience. I think that this particular property, the building that stands on the property, which is causing a lot of the compliance issues, has stood on this property for quite a while. It's not a newer building. I think I heard testimony at the last meeting that it was actually one of the older structures in this particular part of town, and has been added on to over the years. It actually served at one point, if I remember correctly, as some sort of a grocery store or some sort of a market for the neighborhood. But I think that by trying to, again, make best use of this property, we have a lot that's sitting there that's empty, that's undeveloped and can't be developed currently. And so I think that with the fact that only accessory structures can be added onto this, I'd much rather see it be developed into a single family home. Number 5, this is not based exclusively on the desire to extract additional income from the property or a public benefit to the whole will be derived. I believe we had some discussion on this at the last meeting, where obviously the intent of the owner is to sell this property in order to make money. We aren't necessarily opposed to people making money in the city of Evanston on properties. I think that there is a definite benefit by allowing for another single family home to be built in this area. And as we've done over the years, we have tried to encourage building homes on smaller lots with our efficiency home ordinance that recently passed. And so I think that although there is a desire to extract additional income, there is an offsetting public benefit by gaining a new single family home in this neighborhood. Number 6, the hardship or practical difficulty was not created by any person having an interest in the property. As I mentioned before, this property has sort of existed in this condition for quite a while. And so Mr. Tullio himself has not done anything to create the situation. So I believe that this standard has been met. And number 7, it is limited to the minimum change necessary to alleviate the particular hardship or practical difficulty. Again, I think this goes back to a little bit of what we talked about at the last meeting. I know Commissioner Puctel raised this issue and I raised this issue of trying to create not one lot that was properly sized and another very substandard lot, but trying to balance the two so that although both lots are now substandard, they are both substantially closer to the required number of square footage that's required on this property. So I believe that standard has been met. With the exception of Commissioner Lindwall raising the issue on standard number 2, is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up to contradict any of my findings of fact? And I don't see any hands. So now we will move on to the conditions that staff recommended, and we also can put in our own conditions as well. So let me find, where was that? Where were staff's proposals? I've lost them now. Ms. Ashbaugh, do you have those real handy? Or can you give me a page number?
Yes, just a moment. I can pull them up.
All right. All right, well, while you're looking for those, I can remember a couple of them off the top of my head, so we'll start with those. The first one was the removal of the patio. Oh, these are coming up, so I'll take them in order. Okay, so we're on page 19. Okay, so these are that the new interior lot not be granted any building lot coverage or impervious surface coverage variations, that the existing structure, if it is ever removed, a new structure comply with the current zoning code, and that no curb cut be added to Washington Street for either lot. And number 4, that the existing concrete patio be replaced with permeable pavers. So those are the 4 conditions. So we'll go through them one at a time. That the new interior lot not be granted any building or coverage or impervious surface lot coverage variations. Is anyone have any strong feelings opposed to including that? Commissioner Halleck, you are unmuted. I don't know if that means you want to say something or
no.
Okay. Number 2, the existing structure, if it is ever removed, comply with current zoning code. The one question I have on this for staff is, because of the fact that it is a corner lot, it would be required to have a 15-foot setback on that lot. Do we foresee any problems because of that 15-foot setback on Asbury, creating issues for a new structure being built there? Anyone from staff? I'm seeing a no, shaking heads no. Number 3, that a curb cut not be allowed on Washington Street for either lot. It sounds like if we were to make this a condition, we are placing that as a directive upon the community development and public works, or planning and zoning and public works. I would just as soon not include that and allow that to be a discussion at a later point. Sort of kick that one down the road, because if there is a proposal that comes in that can make use of a curb cut there, I don't think we should necessarily limit that from being possible. I would also rather see traffic coming in off of a side street as opposed to one of the main arterial streets through town. But that's my personal feeling. I don't know if anybody else has feelings on the curb cut.
I think this provision should, as is, should be left in.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
And I agree with Chair Rogers. I don't want to box in whoever would be purchasing at some point that lot in the future.
Yeah, and obviously, I think that this should be removed. The other concern I have, if this particular provision is left in, then the cross-access easement, whatever it's with, and I would note that just looking at the parking standards in our zoning ordinance, even for like a parallel parking situation, you're looking at a drive, drive aisle width of between 11 and 12 feet. And here we're talking just barely a parking space width, and, with snow, and if, the owner of lot 1 doesn't park quite right, then you're blocking access to the interior lot, which I think is problematic. But you need to have some way of guaranteeing that there is access provided to the interior lot. And I think that if this remains, then we need to add a provision requiring that the cross-access easement be recorded as part of the subdivision.
I would just add to what Commissioner Lindwall said, that I think that when this whole property development occurs, whether there is an addition to give an easement to the second property, and we find out that that is not possible, we have sort of hemmed in the owners of lot 2 to having to figure out how to make something work that may not work. So I would rather take this out. But I also don't want this to be the reason that this project fails either, is because on this one condition. So I'm going to kind of ask commissioners if they have a strong feeling that they cannot support this because this would be removed, to sort of speak now, so we kind of know whether this is something we need to include or not.
I have a question. So in the future, when this lot number 2 is developed, if someone did propose a curb cut at that time, would that still have to go through some sort of zoning?
It still has to be signed off, from my understanding, from Public Works and the planning staff. Is that correct? That's why I asked that question earlier. So they can't do it by right. They still would need to get city approval for the curb cut.
I would note that because neither property have alley access, they are allowed to have front yard, a driveway go through the front yard. But again, that was just a condition consistent with, as Commissioner Pucktall mentioned, the comprehensive plan, the general city policy of trying to discourage additional curb cut creation.
So it would have to go in front of city staff. Would it come through the land use commission?
No.
Sorry, could you
Well,
clarify?
No, I think it would, because, if we leave this provision in, then you can't, we've already said that you can't have, well, I guess impervious surface lot coverage variation. So the question is whether or not there's any circumstance where the owner of, purchaser of lot 2 could come for zoning relief.
I'm sorry if I cause additional confusion, because the proposed lots do not have alley access. They are allowed to, from a zoning code perspective, are allowed to have the front driveway off of Washington. But to Commissioner Lindwall's point, if a condition were added, that would then apply just to this particular lots, and the access easement were used, then I believe that there would need to be some additional review by the Land Use Commission to not need that condition, to not have that condition apply.
And I guess my question is, in adopting these conditions, are we tying the future purchaser's hands? Or would they be allowed to come back to the commission if we've approved this subdivision with conditions that basically says it's got to meet all zoning requirements?
So considering all of that, I'm in favor of keeping the condition in here and then allowing a future developer to seek zoning relief in the future if that's what they want.
So, okay. Who here, quick show of hands among commissioners, as to if this condition were taken out, who would vote no on this project if condition number 3 about a curb cut be removed? I'm seeing one hand go up. Is there anybody else who would vote against it if this condition were removed? I'm only seeing one hand go up. Okay. So let's go on to condition number 4, which is the concrete patio being removed and replaced with permeable pavers or removed entirely, which was also brought up as a suggestion. And I believe the property owner actually mentioned that that was his understanding of things. Anybody have any thoughts about not removing the patio or saying that it has to be permeable or it doesn't have to be permeable or anything? And I'm not seeing any hands go up, anybody raising any issues. So with that, we have those 4 conditions. Are those 4 conditions? I'm moving to strike number 3, and it's not an official motion, by the way, to strike number 3, but whoever makes the motion, I would like to see number 3 come out. Are there any additional conditions that we feel should be placed on this property if the subdivision were allowed to move forward?
Is there a possibility of and I don't know if this is something we could do, saying that the subdivision process needs to be completed and required and recorded within, say, 1 year of land use commission approval? I mean, this is, because the intent was, from the last meeting was, the purpose of this subdivision was really to provide the applicant with the ability to, resolve a financial situation and, move with his not-for-profit organization and continue the program. And it seems to me that, this is not a subdivision, you want to get it done. So that would be something that I would like to see what other commissioners think about that as a.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we currently have that if you want to do developments, you need to get permits within a year, those sorts of things. So I have no problem with that. I'm assuming city council, if we do approve this, would move fairly quickly on it. I can't imagine it taking them more than a couple months at the absolute longest by the time things get noticed and everything properly distributed through them. So I have no problem placing a condition that the subdivision be executed within 12 months of our decision. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add in? Okay. Any other discussion? I'm sorry, Commissioner Linwell?
No, I was just going to say, are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion. That's where I was going. So.
Okay, I would like to move that we remove condition 3 concerning the curb cut on Washington Street. And I'd also like to add a condition saying that the plat of subdivision would need to be recorded within 1 year of approval by the Land Use Commission.
Okay, so I'm just going to state that a little more formally.
Okay.
In the matter 21 ZMJV 0100 for 1224 Washington Street, that we approve the requested zoning relief with the conditions that the interior lot not be granted any building lot or impervious surface coverage, that the existing structure on the corner lot, if ever removed, comply with the current zoning code, that the existing concrete patio be removed, and that the execution of the subdivision occur within 12 months of our finding, or of our decision, and that the rest of the development be in substantial compliance with the documents and testimony herein.
Second,
Katie, you are still up. And
I
you are
second
sending email. Just a second. I'm letting Commissioner or Ms. Ashbaugh know that she still is sharing her screen as she's typing emails. So before she starts sending out things that we all shouldn't see. So moved by Lindwall.
I was
There was a
actually
second.
going to email our applicants from 1414 Church as they
Okay.
requested, so.
Okay. So Commissioner Lindwall has the motion. There was a second, but I didn't hear who it was. I think it was Commissioner Cullen. Is that correct?
yep, it was me. Yes.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Will you please call the roll?
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself. All right, Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
Commissioner Hugo,
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall,
No,
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
No,
Commissioner Cullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck,
Yes.
and Commissioner Arvalo.
Yes.
That motion passes 7-2.
Okay, so with a 7-2 vote, the motion passes and the project is approved from our end. And so it will now move on to City Council for them to look at the draft plat of subdivision. And I'm assuming staff will keep Mr. Tullio informed as the process moves forward from there, but it has our approval at this end. So good luck with your project, Mr. Tullio.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So with that, now we will move on to the second case we have this evening, which is 21 ZMJV 0095 for 1706 through 10 Sherman Avenue. And is this a Miss Jones project or Miss Ashbaugh?
This is a Miss Ashbaugh. I don't know if Katie, I can read it if you want to save your voice. That'd be fine.
I'll just go ahead and read it. Thank you,
Okay.
Megan. So this is a public hearing for 1706 through 1710 Sherman Avenue, zoning case 21 ZMJV-0095. Stephen Rogan, the Varsity LLC, and Chris DeLeon Campbell Coyle request a major variation from the Evanston zoning ordinance to allow 2 on-site parking stalls where 26 are required, section 6-16-3-5, table 16B, for the addition of 35 upper floor apartments within the existing 4-story building formerly known as the Varsity Theater and the D2 Downtown Retail Core District. The co-applicants also propose to maintain approximately 9,850 square feet of ground floor commercial space within the existing building. No changes to building heights or footprint are proposed. The Land Use Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the determining body for this case, per section 6-3-8-10 of the Evanston zoning ordinance and ordinance 92-0-21. And before I pass it off to the applicant, I did want to note that there was a scrivener's error and the number of required stalls is actually 28, not 26. However, the applicant is of course still proposing 2 compliant stalls on the property.
And just a quick question, that doesn't cause any problems for us in terms of noticing anything?
It does not. I did confirm that with attorney Brian George. He's on the call if you would like to. Him to
No, I
speak.
just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to create a problem because it is a greater change as opposed to a lesser change.
No, it's fine. The amount of, yes, I spoke with Ms. Ashbaugh about it, and it's, we've deemed it to be a Scrivener's error,
Okay,
or the
All right.
equivalent thereof.
all right, thank you. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Rogan and Mr. Dillian.
Thank you very much. Just a quick background. I know we're running long tonight. I just will give you a quick summary. The Varsity Theater, I acquired in 2004. At the time, it had the Gap and a couple of every mattress firm that's been through the city of Chicago. Shortly after I acquired it, the concept of activating the alley came into play, and discussions were had. About a year ago, I was able to acquire the north side of the alley, which made the opportunity to do the ground floor retail in a creative manner, and a hopefully very engaging and exciting concept for the city started to materialize. The other part of the project is 35 apartments that would be built above within the existing shell and structure. The request for parking variation is really driven on a couple of fronts. One, we're from an environmental standpoint, a community standpoint, a sentimental standpoint, we're really doing everything we can within the existing shell to preserve the structure and work within it and still bring a dynamic project to the city. You know, I'm very pragmatic. I try to be, in that I like to try to solve for the problem as opposed to a perceived problem. And we're hoping that by staying within the existing shell, the community perceives and understands the value that is bringing forward. In asking for the variance, we're also trying to show really why it makes sense from a practical standpoint and a functional standpoint. You know, the drive to reduce car use, live, work, play close to home has really shown some dramatic reduction in car use. Some of that has been proven within Evanston, as a lot of these, I say a lot, it may be most, have come back for renegotiation and lower parameters based on the reality of use. When you look at this site and you look at the proximity to whether it's a drugstore, CVS across the street, probably the premier transportation hub in the city of Evanston, which is the L, Metro, the bus terminal / stops that are done there, medical office, a hospital, all offices that are all accessible either by foot or hopping on public transportation. You know, the desire to try to do this in a way that supports the goals and the objectives of the the environmental component of Evanston. We think this project really does play into that. And, you know, I was talking to somebody recently and they brought a point up that I never really had thought about up until a couple of days ago. And, you know, taxpayer funds, whether it be at the state level or local level, actually go to support the L and Metro, and to, you know, now encourage people to bring cars and park them in a space is something that, you know, just kind of got me thinking about, wow, you know, here we are, you know, wanting to worry about parking, but on the other hand, we're really trying to encourage people to use mass transit. And to that point, I hope our goal is to create a program that can encourage change of behavior, as opposed to just worrying about X number of parking spaces in a given project. Again, it has to make sense. I understand parking as a whole is a hot topic, but from a pragmatic standpoint, we're looking at this and saying, how can we change the behavior of people as opposed to just trying to put a Band-Aid on a carbon footprint, et cetera. So we'd love to continue to engage in creative ways to try to change behavior, and hope that this project can help continue to drive that dialogue and that behavior change. And now I'll let Chris do a quick run through some things. Let me just share one other thing. You know, when I started this project, I'm not a developer per se. And I knew that when the day came to take advantage of this, I'd have to find the right partners to put this project together. And actually, Paul Zalmazak at the city first introduced Chris and I. And what really struck me and made me comfortable was that Chris has quite an experience with doing adaptive reuses. And as I like to say, being the younger brother of two older sisters that got dragged through a lot of cosmetic departments as a kid, the environmental part that Chris brings to this picture was kind of like a gift with purchase. So now that I've teed him up in that way, I'll let him take it.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chair Rogers and members of the commission, as well as city staff. I will run through a really high level, just a synopsis on the project itself. First, I just want to introduce the team. Stephen's company, the Benami Group, my firm, Campbell Coyle. We're also teaming with DMA, Development Management Associates, on the development side. Our project architect is GREC, and JLL is working on the retail component of the project with us. Just a little bit about the work that we do. We like transit-rich, connected urban communities. And so we've done work around the Chicago area. This is our District House project in Oak Park. And as Stephen mentioned, we also do an extensive amount of adaptive reuse. This is adaptive reuse of a synagogue and former Boys and Girls Club in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago. We're working with GREC on this project from an architectural design perspective. This is a project that we did with GREC in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago, a boutique hotel. And in general, what really attracted us to GREC is not only their extensive work in adaptive reuse, but also their work in hospitality and thinking about how hospitality might inspire the types of residences that we envision for the Varsity Theater. And so as we think about the Varsity Theater project, we're really sort of viewing this as two projects within the existing volume of the space. The first is the retail experience at grade, and the second is the Varsity Theater volume above, where we're envisioning multifamily residential. And of course, just in terms of geographical context, this is in the heart of downtown Evanston. It's on Bookman's Alley. It's a beloved place. And we really think there's the potential to do something special with this building, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to do just that. In terms of the site plan as it exists today, as well as some of the enhancements, what we sought to do here is really a contextual development that fits right in with the fabric of the downtown area, and really just celebrating the existing building. We are proposing, as Katie mentioned, 2 parking spots in the rear. We have aspirations of expanding that as we sort out our mechanical needs, which we'll get into later. And then there is an easement over the Bookman's Alley area, and you'll see in a moment that we're looking to really create or enhance that place as it exists today. Existing conditions, I'm sure you're all very familiar with this part of downtown Evanston. But it's a beautiful building and one that we're excited to have the opportunity to work in. And of course, the existing conditions of Bookman's Alley. So in terms of the retail component, as Katie mentioned, there's approximately 10,000 square feet of urban storefront retail that more or less exists today. And so that is going to remain. The difference here is that we're intending on orienting that both to Sherman as well as Bookman's Alley. And we believe that there's an opportunity to create or really enhance Bookman's Alley as an activated space and really celebrate that as a beloved space in the downtown area. And so you can see our retail floor plan, you might imagine demising that not only orients retail to Sherman, but also orients it to the alley. And there's a number of precedents. This is just an example of what this could potentially look like, incorporating canopy lighting, public art, et cetera, to really enhance that pedestrian space. As we shift to the upper levels of the Varsity Theater, as Stephen mentioned, we're proposing multifamily rental, 35 urban apartments. Those range from studios to 3 beds, roughly 450 to 1,300 square feet. We are proposing 3 on-site affordable units. And all of the units tend to be a little bit larger. That's largely driven by the dimensions of the building. So we're looking at creative ways to incorporate work from home functionality. Just the upper level floor plans. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just to respect everybody's time, but we can always circle back if needed. This is an axiom of the proposed project. And so you can see we're attempting to be very thoughtful about how we're adding windows, really protecting the front portion of the building and preserving it. But obviously, as you look at the alley, incorporating windows, et cetera. We'll go into some precedent imagery in a moment, but here's a rendered view. Just in terms of materiality, we're looking to really celebrate the existing structure as it exists today and the material palette also as it exists, and bring in compatible new materials, metal panel, storefronts, et cetera, that accentuate, don't intend to sort of replicate things from the past, but complement. We've drawn inspiration from activated alleys. Several of these are from Detroit. We think that there's an opportunity here to create something really special in the heart of downtown Evanston. We're thrilled by the opportunity to incorporate things like lighting, public art, and enhanced, paving, and then really allowing for that interior retail to kind of spill out into the alley area. We're also looking at sort of retro opportunities to kind of draw back elements of the design to what the original era of the Varsity Theater. We're also thinking about ways that we can connect indoors with outdoors. So things like nano wall systems, et cetera, especially on the alley, to really create that flow between those two spaces. And then lastly, as we think about the multifamily component, our bike room is prominently located immediately connected to the lobby. So thinking about how we can really celebrate and emphasize alternative forms of transportation. These are just some indicative interiors. This is actually from the project I mentioned earlier, Logan Square, to give you a sense on what these spaces look like in an adaptive reuse context. So in terms of the variation, as Katie had mentioned, there are 28 parking spaces required. We are currently proposing 2 on-site parking spaces, one of which is an ADA space. We do have aspirations for expanding that number. Dialogue with city staff to date has led to 16 off-site leased parking spaces as proposed. So that puts us at roughly 0.5 parking spaces per unit. This is, and Stephen, I don't know if you want to interject for a moment just to kind of frame the parking conversations.
Some of this we've touched upon already. So, Chris, I'll just let you kind of run through it real quick, because I think most of these we've
Sure.
already brought out in the context of where we're at.
Yeah, so I would say 16 parking spaces. So we don't want to upset the apple cart. We're prepared to move forward with the 16, but I think it's with sort of a acknowledgement that we think that's more parking than is necessary in this context. We have looked at several proximate multifamily projects with similar unit mixes and similar demographics. And in speaking directly with the ownership groups of those properties, they're trending around a 0.1 to 0.3 parking ratio per unit. Our concern with over delivering parking in this case is that ultimately we are going to end up with parking that we're going to have to, that we're going to be more or less reducing rates or ultimately giving them away as incentives or inducements to tenants, which will, in theory, I think, induce unnecessary vehicular demand and traffic in the downtown area, sort of encouraging people to bring more cars into the downtown area. We only say that because ultimately we're big on values, and we think about the values not only of our own organizations, but also the values that we want this project to convey. And we really feel that this project is very much aligned with a project that should have a very low parking count, certainly below 0.5. And ultimately, it also, we've thought a lot about our decarbonization goals for the project. We're looking at an all-electric project at a minimum for the multifamily component. And so those are some of the considerations on our side. In terms of public impact, most importantly, and certainly from a sustainability perspective, the most sustainable thing we can do here is to save an existing building. And so the adaptive reuse of the Varsity in and of itself is a huge win. We also see the significant increase in real estate taxes as transformative in this case, and a big win for the downtown area in terms of new activity, a celebrated space with Bookman's Alley, as well as on-site affordable housing. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have a couple quick questions, just because I want to get these kind of entered into the record. Currently, the Varsity Theater is not being used in any way, shape, or form. Is that correct? The retail space is, but the theater space is not currently under use?
Correct. It's been abandoned since 1984. There was, unfortunately, a fire in the space at some point, and it was pretty much stripped out with regards to seating and any kind of what I'll call consumer infrastructure.
So it's really basically just a big empty box at this moment.
A cube of air, correct.
Okay. This is a question for staff. Is there anything that could be developed in this site that would not require additional parking?
Can you repeat the question?
So if this big cubic box of air, as we're referring to it, were to be developed, it would always require some sort of parking, correct? If they were developing into office space, if they were developing into housing, if they were developing into anything that you can sort of think of. Retail space, etc.
Right,
Okay.
and technically right now it's just kind of non-conforming. The stalls that fit to the rear right now, they're technically there, but they're not striped. So that's, and although the applicant mentioned they're hoping to get an additional stall or two in the back because the loading area is required, that might take some finessing, but I'm not confident they'll actually get 3 stalls or more on the back.
Okay. A couple other quick questions. This is currently a functioning alley. And so I've seen plans, and this is for the applicant. I've seen plans for a pedestrian outdoor space. How does that impact any other buildings who may receive deliveries? Because there are buildings that abut the other side of the alley, on the south side of the alley. How does that impact them in any way, shape, or form?
So that block has what I'll call an upside down T. So off of Clark on the north, and then it runs all the way south to what I refer to the east-west alley in totality as Bookman's alley. And that runs from Sherman to Benson. So by cutting off, or at least converting it to pedestrian traffic, except as an as needed basis, certainly emergency vehicles, but there are utilities in the alley. So on an as needed basis, it is accessible to that type of vehicular traffic. As it relates to the building to the south, Chris, can you, or whoever has the screen, can you go to that diagram that maybe has the easement behind it? I think it's
yeah. Hold on. I am trying to. Is this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. So if you look behind the gray shaded rectangle, which is the former Varsity Theater, behind the mechanical area, there is a 28.5 foot by roughly 75, 80 foot, basically the area west of my building that is north of the former Marshall Fields building, the Galleria now. That is actually my property that has a cross easement with the Galleria property that specifically states that that area is for loading and unloading only. So as it relates to the building to the south, I personally don't believe that there'll be any change to that. You will still have, they use that, we use that as a loading and unloading zone. It will continue to be a loading and unloading zone. We have reached out, we had a conversation, I'm going to say maybe 6, 8, 9 weeks ago with Public Works to ask them, hey, just to put this on your radar, as we get closer to the construction period and actually the easement being implemented, are there thoughts about one-way traffic, not one-way traffic on the north-south, and then that what I'll call the west half of Bookman's alley, for the, to coordinate the flow? Does it make sense to turn the alley into a one-way? Does it not? And they were going to talk to the traffic group and kind of do some further discussions about that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I was just concerned if you were looking at cutting off alley access at some point, how would that impact neighboring buildings?
Yeah. And real quick, I do own the buildings to the north, or not the property to the north of the alley. I had conversations with tenants in there, and we all feel comfortable that everything will work smoothly.
Okay. And then my final question, actually, I wanted to make a statement earlier because just in case a conflict comes up. I noticed Design Evanston has put in some notes from a meeting that they had with you. And for the record, I am a member of Design Evanston, but I did not attend any of those meetings and have not discussed any of those meetings with anyone. So if someone were to discover my name is on the Design Evanston website for some reason, I just want to make sure that I have had make sure to state that I've had no contact with anybody involved in this project.
Actually, Chair Rogers, I will do the same. I think my name, I haven't done anything with Design Evanston in quite a while, but I think my name, the last time I looked, was on their website as well.
So yes, just to clear that up. So back to my final question. Does the Varsity Theater have any historic protections? Is it any sort of a landmark? Is it, does preservation's not involved in this at all, I'm assuming?
It is not a landmark building. It is not a historic building. That said, and Chris can talk to this as well, we really have done this and really wanted to do it in a manner that is an adaptive reuse that is actually trying to pay homage and remain in the character and context of what it is, which is a building, a charming building. And I don't mean what it is in a discounting way, but to really accent what it is and not to change the character of the building. We're not looking to tear off the facade. We're not looking to demo it. We're really trying to work. Chris, I'll let you expand upon that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime we approach these projects, we intend to celebrate the existing structure, and we approach any of these projects with an eye towards utilizing best practices. You know, the project I referenced earlier that we recently completed in Logan Square has won 3 major national awards. Every project that we approach, we're looking at it saying, how can we do what's right by the building, and also try to really create something that's special. And I think in this case, we believe that this is a great solution for this building. There's certainly plenty of other examples in Evanston where, you know, especially in this part of Evanston, where you could easily justify a taller building or something different. We're trying very intentionally to be contextual and to do the right thing.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions from other commissioners?
I have some questions.
Commissioner Halleck.
Actually, my first question is for staff, and I think I asked this at every one of these where we're deferring parking, and I just hope that the staff is keeping tabs of, you know, these 16 parking spaces that are going to be in another facility, just so we don't double count. And all I need is a yes on that. So that's my first question. The other questions are for the developer. I'm really glad to see this project go forward. I think it'd be fantastic, but just a few questions. One of them is you have 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms units, but your affordable is only it's, what is it, 2 1s and 1 2. Any chance of including a third, instead of 2 1s, 1 bedroom, 1 2 bedroom, and 1 3 bedroom in the affordable? And I only say that because the more I hear about this affordable issue, it's families that need the affordability, and families have kids, and you know, so any chance of doing that?
You know, we had a conversation with Sarah Flax, and we did specifically discuss that. I think we're always receptive to additional conversations as we work to finalize this. Ultimately, you know, the reality on this project in particular is that there are no, as far as we can find, there are no viable public incentives. And typically, when you're dealing with an adaptive reuse, especially for these historic buildings, many of the other precedents, specifically around the Chicago area, but also nationally, leverage a variety of public incentives. And so we are, I would say, constrained. And so one of the challenges is that, you know, ultimately the 3-bed rental rate from an affordable perspective is a very significant financial challenge to the project, more so than relative to the 1 or even the 2-bed. And so ultimately that was how we built consensus on the affordable unit mix. We're happy to look at it again and see if there are other creative solutions that we can identify, but that's sort of where we've landed, at least for the time being.
Yeah, I kind of expected you to say that you'd thought about it, and it is a big deal. People don't understand how big of a deal it is to add affordable in terms of your pro forma. I get it. Another question is, you showed a perspective of the north elevation, but the south elevation on your plan, the space between the Fields building and your building is only 10 feet, right? What, I thought the light and vent requirement was 12 feet. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know what, Chris could expand upon this.
Chris, I'll let you.
I could be wrong, but I'm asking, well, there's two issues. One of them is light and vent, and that's a code issue. The other is rating, you know, on the windows, if they're across from other windows, which I'm not sure they are. And the third is just the view from those units with the wall 10 feet away.
Yeah, I think I don't know that I have the specific code expertise to respond to that, but we are happy to look into it. I think relative to the 10 feet as it exists today from a marketability perspective, we do feel that those units are still marketable. We are looking at other design solutions, potentially pulling the windows in. We do have some space to give potentially if we need to, so that we could inset those windows to provide a little bit more space, or even potentially put inboard balconies on that elevation. So there are some solutions that we're exploring. We just haven't gotten to the point where we've made any sort of final determination.
Okay. My last question, and this really isn't a land use purview probably, but I noticed on your plan that you only have one elevator. And if that, I've always thought that you got to have two elevators, because if one breaks down, you got to, you know, people are moving in, people need to go up to their unit. How does that work with one elevator?
Well, you know, we do the 28 unit project called District House in Oak Park that I showed the picture of, sort of a modern take on the prairie style. 28 units, one elevator. We are proposing, or we'll be in for permit shortly on 1101 Church Street. That's a 30 unit project with one elevator. It can be done. The elevator will be oversized, so it will be sized as a freight elevator. And I would say we're probably at the towards the higher end of the range of what you would want to service with one elevator. We also want to think about ways that we can enhance the connectivity of the first and second floor, and even the third floor, so that there are desirable alternatives to taking the elevator, especially if you live on the second floor, as an example. So those are some of the strategies that we'll incorporate. You know, ultimately, adding another elevator is well into the six figures. So it is not an insignificant financial decision. And this project, as I sort of alluded to on the affordable side, you know, we're really trying to make very smart decisions from a cost perspective as we dig into it.
That's all. That's all I have. Thank you.
I noticed a couple of questions in the chat about, is the apartment entrance going to be in the alley? No, it's the plans are for it to be on the south side of Sherman Avenue. I also saw a question about Sherman Avenue and how to activate that in front of the building.
Mr. Rogan, I hate to cut you off right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold those questions for public comment, because I want to get the commissioners to get their questions in first. And I was trying to unmute myself while I was desperately trying to interrupt you, but my mouse was not cooperating. I think Commissioner Westerberg had her hand up for some questions.
A couple of questions, gentlemen. Where do you know where you would find the 16 parking stalls to augment what you have on site? Have you had discussions with any of the other locations in town?
We've had conversations with city about public garages, and we've had some conversations with initial conversations with other properties within the 1,000-foot range.
But nothing has been clearly set in stone yet, correct?
Correct.
I mean, parking is a perennial problem in discussions, as I'm sure you know. I wouldn't personally want to see a lot of parking here because of the traffic. I do think that considering it to be a mission to help people relieve themselves of cars can be difficult in Evanston. So I would really like to see some truly organized explanation of where those parking stalls are going to be. I think that's a really important component to your plan in terms of moving forward. And the other question I had was, have you seen other locations in Chicago that have used this kind of interesting connection between alleys and existing buildings and streetscapes and how those work out? There are a couple in the West Loop, and I'm just curious if you've had a look at some of them.
Yes, I have. There's one that I've frequented a couple of times because my son lives about 2 blocks away from it. And they're very well received. They're driven by the tenants. They're driven by the feel. I've seen some in Toronto. I've seen some, I have not personally seen the ones in Denver, but I'm sorry, in Detroit, but I have been shown numerous pictures, some of which appeared this evening. There is a wonderful block, an entire stretch in Denver that's been done. I can tell you that these are cropping up. There is an alley in the loop that, and I don't know the name of it. There's another, it's off of LaSalle, and there is another alley. I've been down that one, and it's well done. And there's another one I've only seen pictures of that has an Italian restaurant, I believe, at the very back, and that's the only thing that's back there. So they're quite frankly, we're hoping this will be the first of what will hopefully be many creative spaces within Evanston.
Is there anything particularly special about the mix of pedestrian and vehicular traffic in Bookman's Alley that you think poses a problem or is something that you want to take particular interest in?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
In other words, you have a lot of pedestrian traffic that goes through there. You will also have deliveries, vans, things of that nature. How are you looking at kind of controlling that and making sure that folks are safe?
Well, we'll be putting ballards up on the east end at Sherman and at the what I'll call the west side of Bookman's Alley, not Benson, but just at that upside down T. There'll be ballards there that are removable on an as needed basis. I will tell you, and I don't want to speak for anybody at city staff, but I personally have always found that having 18-wheel trucks pull out of the area onto Sherman Avenue, which is probably one of as busy a pedestrian sidewalk as there are in downtown Evanston, maybe not the busiest, but certainly a very busy stretch. I personally don't feel comfortable walking north and south on Sherman when I get there because I fortunately have never seen an accident and I hope there never is, but I've always been perplexed by why they let 18-wheelers. I see Benson, it's not as heavily traveled. Clark's not quite as heavily traveled, but Sherman. So hopefully it's the removal of a potential hazard, you know, from a traffic safety standpoint.
Thanks. One last question. I know this is not a historic building, but are there any architectural elements within the building that you intend to save or use within the units themselves?
Yes. There are some elements in there. We've had conversations with the architect. We've challenged them to come up with creative ways to do it. We haven't finalized anything, but there's not a lot in there, to be honest with you. But we have in Design Evanston asked the same question, and we got into a little bit more specific details of what we feel is still in there. But there's not a lot. They're more ornamental things than they are functional things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Westerberg. Other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Fructell.
Yes, thank you. Can you talk to your work in trying to comply with the Evanston Green Building Ordinance?
Chris,
Sure. Yeah. So, we do have familiarity with the green building ordinance, as I mentioned earlier. Right now, our intention at a minimum is to explore an all electric building for, at a minimum, the multifamily component. We're sort of navigating the challenges of trying to accomplish that with a retail component that might have a kind of a heavy F&B sort of angle. But so we are, I would say, interested in moving the dialogue forward on decarbonization in particular. So we would intend to fully comply with the green building ordinance. And I think the special thing that we're trying to do here is the focus on all electric in terms of really preparing for and future proofing the building as we focus on decarbonization.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? If not, I will open it up at this point to the public for any questions they may have for the developer or any comments that they may like to make. And I'm going to ask you to please just raise your hand and I will call on you as I see hands go up. Anyone? Yes, I saw someone's hand go up, but all I see is a name of owner. So if you would please just identify yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, my name is Ibrahim Shihadi. I somehow couldn't get my name there. It's somewhere else. I'm the owner of the commercial, the Galleria, south side of where Steve building is.
Okay.
Should I talk or?
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Well, my concern about vacating the alley and what kind of traffic problem it's going to cause for the delivery trucks, for the 5 restaurants, for the 55 apartments moving in and out from in the back, and by shutting the alley, and it will be very difficult for the traffic, the garbage trucks also, to come from the T alley from the north, from the south to the north. So I think this is a major problem. Where,
I'm sorry, are you finished, sir?
No, I mean, I see the LA looks nice the way he's proposing to use it. He could really do the same thing he's doing in the alley by taking some area from the first floor in the north side of his building, where we don't have to vacate the alley. Because, we have people who deliver constantly in the back, and that will cause a big traffic jam. I'm done.
Mr. Rogan, do you have anything you'd like to respond to that on?
Yes. Well, look, right now the garbage trucks currently go north and south and go west. So they're doing it now. I think they will continue to do it. I'm speaking from past experiences, both a landlord and a employee of a particular type of business that, look, at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to work together. And I think that some of the issues about delivery, when the Gap was my tenant, every year or two, maybe every third year, I would get a notice from the Gap asking about, what are your delivery hours? What type of trucks are we required to use? Can we use this truck? Can we use that truck for size and things of that nature? I also worked for a business years ago that had other requirements of their suppliers. Please don't bring an 18-wheel truck for deliveries. Please use a box truck. So yes, those are solutions that I think are viable and out there. And I am more than willing to work in a way that works for everybody. That's kind of my thoughts.
Stephen, if I could just add I think
I think also there, I didn't finish. Also, we have a problem with the fire department because the gallery, the gallery, the 55 units don't have a stair in the front on Church Street. The key for the stairs, it's in the back. So the fire department, if there's a fire in any of those 55 units or the proposed 35 units or the stores, the fire department has to come through that alley. They will not come through the front. If you guys search, you'll find that. And that's a big major problem. You can't tell the fire department, let's wait till we vacate the alley so the trucks can come in. That alley has to stay open because there is no stairs. Remember, there's no stairs in the front on Church Street. So the fire department to have to get in through that alley.
All right, I'm going to step in here real quick and kind of refocus us. We've kind of gotten some other questions about this building, but we're really looking at the parking. We're not talking about vacating the alley. That's not what we're being asked to do tonight. The question has just come up as sort of, since that's where the parking access will come in, as to how that would be impacted. But I don't want to get too far afield from where we actually are talking about what we're looking at tonight's meeting. Obviously, if the desire is to vacate the alley at some point in the future, Public Works and City Council will have to get involved and have hearings on that. But that's not something that's in our purview for this evening. Okay. The next hand I see up is Chris G. So if you could please just tell us your name and address for the record and go ahead and ask your questions or make your comments.
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris Green and I am the board president at the Galleria that is on the south side of the Varsity Theater. Just wanted to reiterate, I guess, the same concerns that Ibrahim just raised. And I guess since you have refocused the meeting away from the use of the alleyway itself and towards the parking in the back, I'm just concerned about the impact that increased loading and unloading for an additional 35 units and what was said earlier about initially having an easement for, or initially having just a couple of parking spaces, but with desires to expand that in the future, how that will impact the easement that the Galleria has and the amount of truck traffic that loads and unloads through that loading dock in the back for both the 52 units that are in our building residential and the retail space that already exists in the Galleria, including the restaurants. There's a lot of use of that alleyway in the back. And I think that increasing the amount of volume of traffic in the alleyway is going to cause more congestion, especially if half the alleyway is cut off. But since we're not talking about closing the alleyway itself tonight, just the amount of congestion that will be added to the back of the alleyway with the proposal.
You want?
I would actually, I'd love to respond. You know, the retail as it exists today, that as I mentioned, there's approximately 10,000 square feet of retail that exists today. And while I recognize there's been some vacancy, it certainly was relatively recently populated with tenants. And so there's really no change. And in fact, you know, prior to that, when the theater was in existence, you know, that was a much more heavily vehicular focused use. So this building has more or less existed in this condition for multiple generations. So I think we're really, I guess, talking about maybe the variance being the multifamily component and what that may mean from a parking perspective in the rear. You know, we proposed the 2 parking spaces. There may be the ability to scale that up to at most probably 5 spaces. And that more or less is consistent with the existing conditions. While they're not marked well in the existing conditions today, I really don't think that's a significant deviation And as Stephen mentioned, from a loading perspective, we are happy to work with the city to come up with logical loading hours. We intend to operate this in a first-class manner. We intend to populate this with fantastic tenants. And so that's the way we operate our properties. And we'd encourage anybody to look at the way we do operate our properties. We're proud of operating things at a high level and at a Class A level. And that would be our expectation.
And just as a side note, Chris, I'm happy. I'll reach out to you tomorrow or Friday. I'll track you down. In the past, I've been dealing with your predecessor, Phil. So I'm happy to reach out to you and have this discussion as well. I'm sorry, Phil, I said Chris. Sorry, I meant Chris.
No, I understood what you said. Yeah, we'll connect somehow. We just want to make sure that there's an equitable solution for everybody, and congestion in the back alley, especially for the reasons that Ibrahim noted, is certainly a concern with us. And not least of which the emergency services, but the moving in and out of both the 52 new units that we have here and the additional 35 that you're proposing. The retail space that Ibrahim already owns and is active currently in our building on the first floor, and the spaces that you're proposing. So we'll continue the conversation, but just wanted to have it out there that it is a concern, and I do believe it would be an interruption to how our building currently operates, to further congest that space in the back.
Well, I think it's safe to say that it's not it hasn't functioned for a number of years. So I'm happy to hear we'll work to get it resolved.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the public? I'm not seeing any hands, so I will ask Mr. Rogan and Mr. Dillian if they would like to say anything in summation before we close the record and begin deliberations.
I think we've covered everything at this point.
All right. With that, then we will close the record and begin deliberations. Again, just kind of we've talked about a number of issues, and I've kind of wanted to get some of these in the just sort of in the record, so that some of the concerns about things that are outside of what we're doing but would be impactful in the neighborhood could be addressed. But kind of again refocusing us, the zoning relief that's being sought here is to allow 2 on-site parking stalls where 28 are required. So I'll ask commissioners if they have thoughts, anything you'd like to share before we go through standards. Not seeing anyone. So we will go through the standards then. And again, feel free to add something if I've missed something you think, or if you don't agree with my finding, please speak up at that point as well. Again, we have 7 standards that must be met for this. Again, they are in 63812, which are the standards for a major variation. The first one being that the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. In this particular case, the property is being redeveloped, which should help neighboring property values. But in regard to specifically the 2 parking spaces, I don't believe that we're changing the conditions of the property substantially. There currently are a few parking spaces back there, it sounds like, although they're not necessarily designated well. So I don't believe that this will have an adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, property values of neighboring properties. We've heard of a few concerns, but it sounds like everything is workable through bodies outside of our body. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. This is an adaptive reuse of a building that has sat vacant for many, many years. In the back half of the building, the retail use has been consistently used. It sounds like maybe not always full, but at least fairly regular tenants there. And so the zoning ordinance does seek to reuse existing structures where possible and make them fit in with the current lifestyle of people and what people in Evanston need and want. So I believe that standard is met. Number 3, the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. Again, this is a building that I don't know exactly when the Varsity Theater was built, but it's been there for quite a while. And the space that's been allotted for parking has been there since the construction of that building and the neighboring buildings. So unfortunately, there is no place that 28 parking spaces could fit on this property. And it's because of the way the property was developed many, many years ago. Number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. This kind of goes back to the question of if anything is done with the old theater space, parking requirements are going to kick in. There's nothing that could really be developed here that would not require some level of parking, and with only 2 to 5, I think is what the number they said they might be able to expand to upon digging into this, doesn't come anywhere near the 28 spaces that would be required. So basically that means nothing can be developed here if the strict letter of the regulations were applied. So I believe that standard is met. Number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property or the public benefit aspect, which I'm not going to read. I don't believe that these parking spaces are going to drastically increase property values for any development that occurs in the site. It sounds like that with just the 2 parking spaces for 35 units that are being built there, it's not something that's going to drive income significantly for this property or for this developer. So I believe that standard is met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. Again, going back to the comments I made earlier about this property and the neighboring properties have been developed in this condition for many, many years, decades. And so the current owner of this property has done nothing to create the condition that would prevent him from putting parking on the space, as well as making it a serviceable alley still and granting access to neighboring buildings that have easements and things like that. So I believe that standard is met. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before this board. Again, the fact that the 2 parking spaces is kind of what can be placed there. They might be able to stretch it to a couple more, but we're never going to fit the full 28 in there. And the fact that they are looking at leasing parking spaces from the city to bring them into greater compliance, I believe that this standard is met as well. Is there anyone who disagrees with my findings on any of the standards? I don't see any hands going up. So with that, I will ask if there is a motion in regard to 21 ZMJV 0095 for 1706 through 10 Sherman Avenue. Again, reminding that we are making a recommendation to City Council on this matter since it is a parking issue.
Okay, let me see if I can do this properly. I'd like to recommend with respect to 1706-10 Sherman Avenue, 21 ZMJV-0095. I move approval of, to recommend approval of a major variation to allow 2 on-site parking stalls where 28 are required, with a condition that the applicant lease 16 additional parking stalls off-site for a total of 18 stalls where 28 are required.
Moved by Commissioner Lindwall and seconded by
Commissioner Cullen.
Commissioner Cullen.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Pactel,
Yes.
Commissioner Hugo,
Yes.
Commissioner Linwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Cullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck,
Yes.
and Commissioner Aravalo.
Yes.
So with a 9-0 vote, the project moves forward to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Mr. Rogan and Mr. Dillian, city staff will follow up with you to let you know when you'll be appearing before the Planning and Development Committee of City Council and move you through the next stage of the process. And good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, now we'll move on to our third case of this evening, which is 22 ZMJV 0005, 2356 Colfax Terrace. I think our zoning administrator is handling this one, if I'm correct. So Ms. Klotz, if you would please read it into the record for me.
Thank you, Matt. Sarah and Patrick Hillman, property owners, submit for major zoning relief from the Evanston zoning ordinance for additions to a single-family residence in the R1 single-family residential district. The applicants request zoning relief for 32.7% building lot coverage where a maximum 30% is allowed, section 6827, 54.5% impervious surface coverage where a maximum 45% is allowed, section 68210, a 1.5 foot north interior side yard setback where 5 feet is required, section 6828, a 3.3 foot north interior side yard setback where 4.5 feet is required for a yard obstruction or roof overhang, section 6419, a 17.4 foot west rear yard setback where 30 feet is required, section 6828, a 10.5 foot west rear yard setback where 27 feet is required for a yard obstruction roofed walk, section 6419. Detached accessory structures in the front yard where detached accessory structures are only permitted inside and rear yards, section 6462D and 6463A. A 2 foot north yard setback where 3 feet is required to any property line for detached accessory structures, section 6462E. A 1 foot north interior side yard setback where 2.5 feet is required for a yard obstruction on a detached accessory structure or roof overhang, section 6419. 35 foot height for a detached accessory structure where a maximum 20 foot height is allowed for accessory structures that are not garages or ADUs, section 6462G. A fence in the front yard where fencing is not permitted within the front yard or within 3 feet of the front facade of the house, section 6467F. And 7.3 foot fence height where a maximum fence height of 6 feet is allowed, section 6467F. The Land Use Commission is the final determining body for this case per section 6389 of the Evanston zoning ordinance and ordinance 92-021. With that said, revisions were submitted on February 11th, 2022, and that did completely eliminate the request for building lot coverage and for accessory structure height, and it reduced the impervious surface variation request down to 51.4%. With that, I believe the applicants would probably like to jump in and start explaining what the entire proposal is.
Before we go there, just let me get this straight. So we've removed the building lot coverage altogether, correct? We're at a 51.4 instead of a 54.5 for impervious surface.
Correct.
Okay.
And we have removed the 35 foot height detached accessory structure where 20 feet is allowed because it's now at the 20 foot height.
Correct.
Okay.
And for a more understandable version of that, it is listed kind of in number form on the staff memo.
Right, I saw that. I just wanted to, I was looking at my agenda here and was trying to keep track of things because I go back and forth sometimes. I do have one question for staff before I let Mr. Hillman begin here. We received a unanimous neutral recommendation from DAPR. Can you explain exactly what a unanimous neutral recommendation is?
A neutral recommendation means that staff is not recommending approval and not recommending denial.
Okay.
Oh, it's a pass the buck designation.
Is there any particular reason that occurred? When I was reading through the Dapper minutes, it appears that a number of people had reservations about this, but then it was a unanimous decision. And you may not be able to answer this for me, but I suppose I would like someone, perhaps Director Neiden at some point. I don't want to call her out since she's not at this meeting, but maybe if she could provide us with kind of a why we don't get a positive or negative recommendation, or at least a vote, even if it's a 5-5 split or something like that. So we kind of have a little more direction from Dapper as to how to look at these cases. So that's not necessarily a question for you, Ms. Klotz. It's kind of a comment maybe. I'll throw that back to my regular staff who is our liaison here, to maybe follow up with Ms. Neiden and ask her if she could just provide us some insight as to why a neutral recommendation has come forward. We don't do that when we send things on to City Council. And I would like that not to become regular habit for city staff to present things to us with a non-recommendation. I'd like to see at least a vote of people are in favor, people are split, people are whatever. So if you could just follow up with that and maybe at our next meeting have something for us or put it in an email to us, I'd appreciate that. So with that said, I will now turn it over to Mr. Hillman, who I believe is the property owner, and ask him to explain the project that he's proposing.
Thank you very much. And also I'm joined by Joe Lamke, who is my architect and also my cousin, in the interest of transparency here. And so Joe, I'm gonna pull up a couple slides if you folks don't mind to just walk through and hopefully try and simplify some of this, because and I don't want to, I can't speak for Dapper, but I can say that this is a really unique sort of project because of the nature of the property. And well, let me quick share the screen, if you don't mind. Is it up, Katie?
Yeah, you have it. I just thought you didn't know that you had the permission. So, but you're good.
I don't always ask for permission, okay? I'll just give it a shot. Thank you. So I know they say you should never discuss politics when you're meeting a new group of people, but this part of Evanston is my wife and I's favorite part of Evanston, and everyone has their favorite part, and this is ours. And last year, when we had the opportunity to purchase finally a piece of property in this area of Evanston, we jumped on it. But there are three specific characteristics that are extraordinarily atypical. Perhaps not in a one-off scenario, but when they're combined together, probably make this piece of property, I would guess, limited to one or two other piece of properties, if not wholly unique in the area. And as a result, and because this property was developed over 50 years ago and has remained unchanged since that time, it's currently not in compliance according to code, and trying to sort of update this home in a way that's livable, but also protects certain characteristics of the neighborhood that are really important to us is extraordinarily challenging. And what you're looking at here on this main slide is probably the most important part of the entire equation here, or one of two. This is the alley that runs down the side of our property. And what you'll see at the end of the street there, it is a very wide alley. It's, I believe it's 20 feet or maybe just a little bit wider than that. And that white fence line there has been there since the property was really developed and has been unmolested for 50 years. That'll be important because we're looking to continue to build on this house, but we want to build towards the alley so that we don't have to build towards our neighbors. And I think that has created a number of the challenges that we're going to hopefully be able to talk through today. So I think first of all, for us, what's most important is that these were our project objectives. We're looking to rebuild this 6-year-old house that's, again, on this very atypical home or lot that can house my family, my wife and our kids. And it's been vacant for over a decade. We want to put an addition on this home that parallels the current footprint because it allows for this light and airy feeling in the neighborhood, which is part of the reason why we love it. And we want to protect that green space. And it's also going to help ensure that our neighbors who have their own green space abide to us that abuts our property, that we're going to continue to allow for that natural light for our neighbor while also maximizing play area for our kids. Possibly most important, we want to block off views and access for our children to these this exposed alley and trash cans, which we and I think a number of our neighbors believe will be a quality of life and safety update, and will be in the interest of the entire neighborhood. And then finally, we really want to maintain the look and feel of the mid-century neighborhood. It's a very unique little like cul-de-sac community in Evanston, and we love it, and we want to help maintain it. So with that, here's where some of the challenges kind of come in. To our north, we have that really long alley that runs the entire length of our property. Again, there's no shortage of pieces of property in Evanston that have this issue. Then to our west, we also have the railroad tracks. And that is noisy. And obviously we wanted to find a way to build a home that's going to protect that noise and block it off. We obviously want to find ways to also, cover off that alley so that it's not immediately viewable by us and continually viewable by our neighbors, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the more tricky part comes in is that our house is actually on Colfax Terrace. And as you'll see in this survey, Colfax Terrace is privately owned, but also has a large cul-de-sac at the end of it, which goes primarily into our property, which allows our neighbors to be able to drive easily in and out of their own properties, which obviously is unique for a number of different cases, but it also comes into play around impervious land and everything else. So when you take these three characteristics and put them together, we believe this is a really atypical property. And knowing that though, Joe and my wife and I have worked really hard over the last 6 months to try and figure out like, what is a design that we can do here that's going to really bring life to this space, to protect the characteristics that we love so much about and that I think our neighbors really like about it as well, and also actually improve the property around us, both to our benefit and also to our neighbors. So this is essentially what the site map looks like. And I'll let Joe talk a little bit about a number of these different variations that we're asking. But as you'll see at the very top, there's a very thin little dotted line. That is that current existing white fence line that has, again, been there since the home was built. We're looking to build within that fence line. We're not looking to go up to it. We're not looking to go beyond it. The darker sort of red line is where the current house sort of sits. And so we're looking to just sort of change that footprint a little bit while maintaining that sort of L-like sort of structure without having to infringe onto our neighbors. As you'll see on the right, that's actually a picture taken from my neighbor's advantage. They, like us, look directly into the alley and our neighbor's garbage cans and into the street lights that are there to light that alley. And so we really done everything we can to figure out some creative ways to develop this project in a way that is in the interest of the community, that's in line with what the code is, and in a way that allows us to be as compliant as possible to do that. Here's just one sort of last view before I turn it over to Joe to kind of walk through I think some buckets on what we're looking for. But again, as you'll see, it's just really kind of a strange layout. And obviously when this area was developed, it continues to be privately owned by myself and my neighbors. It was just a different time. And so, many of my neighbors are, at that sort of point of retiring in their age, and we've gotten to know them and we love them. They're good people and we want to do whatever we can to, to build up this property, but we don't want to do anything that's going to, impugn on their ability to access to their driveways, to have better views in the neighborhood. And so, this is another sort of key aspect of this project that we're working really hard to sort of find creative solutions to. So Joe, do you want to talk through here and take over and maybe talk a little bit about some of the specific characteristics here of the project and why they're important to us, why some of them weren't, we've sort of changed. And again, thank you to all of you for taking time. We know this is a long night and it's a weeknight, and thank you, Melissa, for working with us over the last week and a half to, improve on some of these plans. So go ahead, Joe.
So to begin, I need to admit that there was a Scrivener, Bartleby's Scrivener error in one of our drawings. Back in October, late September, early October, we submit for a minor zoning variation, and correctly at that point had the impervious surface coverage maximum at roughly 3,400 square feet. However, subsequent to that, as all kinds of changes were happening, subsequent to that submittal for a minor zoning variation, we fat-fingered the number, the impervious surface coverage, and thought the maximum was higher than it is. So we admit to this mistake. We identified it just recently on February 17th. We notified Melissa that was part of our problem. But from the beginning, we were not seeking lot coverage nor impervious surface coverage variations, because Katie had told us from the very beginning that those are not looked favorably upon. So we were not seeking a lot coverage nor impervious surface coverage. So I just wanted to kind of take that issue off the table. So of the 12 items that Melissa read through, which was helpful, we really have 3 items in green. The first one is lot coverage. The second one is impervious surface coverage. And the 10th item she read was the height of the chimney, which is located on this diagram. You could see the number 10 where there's an outdoor fireplace. So those 3 items are no longer on the list. We're not requesting those variations. From the beginning, as Patrick described, we really are looking at a setback off the alley. That's what this has been about. That's why we thought we could apply for a minor variation. As you could see on this diagram, there's 2 very nice elm trees towards the northeast portion of the site. We want to make sure we maintain them. So we're trying to navigate the house through there and simultaneously block off the alley. But so those 2 setbacks where number 3 and number 8 are, those are rooms that are set back off the alley, but give us this kind of undulating effect on the alley that mimics the rest of the alley. Instead of, we had an earlier scheme, much earlier, where we had one long wall, continuous wall, and we wanted to push the bicycle room, which is number 8 there, even further to the east, because it's really a side yard, and make the front of the house the south. The effective front is the south facade. But that was an earlier scheme. We tried to elongate it, and but we ended up here. So we're here, and really 3 and 8 are both setbacks off the alley. So if we get the setback for 3, it obviously, if we get 8 as well, they're the same. It's the same issue. It's a setback off the alley. But those are the 2 most important things that we're looking at. And then the blue items, the blue numbers there, impact how the yards, these unusual yards on this peculiar site, are interpreted. So there's the neighbor to the north. You could see a diagonal dashed line to the left of the site. That's the setback line to the northern neighbor, who has no curb cut on Poplar Avenue. That's Poplar Avenue, which is a dead end just south of us. So they have no curb cut there. So we're similar to them on the north side of the alley in that it's a side yard, whereas our southern neighbor, they do have a curb cut, which is shown in this diagram. And so to them, to our southern neighbor, it's a rear yard. So because of these peculiar and unusual yard situations, these blue items came up as zoning variances. So to go through them, we'll start with number 5. The blue number 5, we basically, that's the existing garage in the dark red. We just wanted to make the garage a little bit deeper. So we were going to expand the garage toward the alley, which was still more than 5-foot setback off the alley, so that there was plenty of room for turning. radius. So we just wanted to expand the garage, make it a little bit deeper, allow people to walk around their car without the old fashioned tight garage dimension. So that variance, that variation number 5 is to expand the alley or expand the garage toward the alley, not towards the street. And we're not going into the 5-foot setback of an alley or 3-foot setback of an alley. So that one seemed reasonable to us, but it was triggered by the consideration of the yards. And then number 6 is the same issue. Number 6 is basically a side entrance to the proposed home. And similar to the northern neighbor, they also have a side entrance. And we just wanted to put a little canopy above that side entrance. And so because that was a roof overhang, that side entrance canopy, that's number 6. And then number 7 on the right side or the east side of the site was where we were extending a bicycle room, kind of a utility garage off the alley, to block the view for all of the neighbors on Colfax Terrace so that they have less view of the alley. So we were trying to push that element as far east as possible. Again,
And Joe,
technically,
I would add and to block access for kids,
Right.
with the alley being there in the play area.
Right. And you could see there's a vertical red dashed line. That's a 30-foot setback from the easternmost property line, which is a side yard to our neighbor to the east at the north portion, but of course is in the cul-de-sac in the southern portion. But again, the yards have triggered this variation for number 7, even though what we're really trying to do is keep that barrier from the alley and hide the trash cans for the rest of the neighborhood on Colfax Terrace. So that was number 7. And then number 12, the other item, that's the 7'3" fence height. We were not calling that a fence because it's within the side yard setback of 5 feet. So it's not close to the property line, number 1. Number 2, we would like to include a porch there. And that's an outdoor area with a glass wall to the home to the west. And so since people will be standing and walking around on a raised porch that's roughly 2.5 feet above ground, we didn't want to take away the southern neighbor's privacy. So if we raise the fence to essentially 7, if it's 2'6", we raise the fence up to 7'3". It's just enough that people walking around on Patrick's porch won't be looking down into the neighbor's windows. So we consider this to be a privacy wall. And we don't think of it as a fence. Now, so that's why we have 12. And indeed, the height of the neighbors to the south, the height of their house at that point is significantly greater than 7'3". It's probably close to, I mean, it's a gable roof end, but it's probably close to 20 feet. So we didn't think that was going to be an issue. And indeed, the neighbors to the south totally support our project. So that brings us to the gray items. So there's a number of gray items, 4, 9, and 11. And these are really small issues to us. They're not, they're architectural issues. 4 and 9 are basically a roof eave. So it's the eave of a roof, which is very common in Evanston. My understanding was that roof eave is an allowable obstruction. So that's why it was on there. If we needed to get rid of it, we would work with it architecturally so that we didn't have it. We didn't think that roof eave, the eave of the roof, was an issue. We fully understand it needs to have a 1-hour rating on the underside, but we didn't think that eave was going to be a problem. But it sounds like it is, given the yards, the unusual yards. And then lastly is we have item number 11 there in the south portion. And really, That's kind of a screen wall. There's a air conditioning unit. Our southern neighbor has an air conditioning unit down there. And so that's a little screen wall to just kind of separate the properties in a gentle manner. We've lowered it. So it really is, I think it's 3'4" high. So it's kind of a low height screen. We plan to do some landscaping up there as well. There's a number of trees on the property line. So we see that as again, a minor issue. We think it contributes to the well-being of the community, hiding a little air conditioner. And yet we were cited because it was in the front yard when we're trying to obscure a air conditioning unit, which is in the neighbor's side yard. Obviously, it's close to the sidewalk, as you can see. So I think that's it. So those are the 12 items, 3 of which, we grouped them together for you. We think all of these 12 items, not counting the 3 that we've want to satisfy elsewhere, we think all 7 of the reasons of the standards are met with these items. We don't think there's any adverse impact to what we're doing at all for any of these items. Number 2, it's keeping with the intent of the zoning. The setbacks on the west portion are matching the north neighbor. We're matching the south neighbor. We're matching the other garages and ADUs in the alley. We're matching some of the front yards of the houses on Colfax Terrace. So we think it's keeping with the intent of the alley. Alleys have a certain relationship. And so we think we're keeping intent with the zoning. The hardship, as Patrick mentioned, is definitely peculiar to this property. And the strict, so number 4, the strict regulations are what's pulling these things up. I mean, what we're doing is matching the neighborhood, but the strict interpretation of the regulations is citing all of these problems when really they're not really problems. They're adding to the well-being of the community. Of course, we're not seeking additional income from this, and nobody created these problems. It's not created by a person. It's just the logical difficulty of zoning ordinances, which were made for rear yards on an alley, front yards as front yards, and we have this atypical condition. And we think it's the least deviation possible. Again, we really wanted to push that bicycle room at number 7 even further to the east. We brought it back. That previous minor variation, we wanted the bicycle room up tight to the alley where the fence is, but we've pulled that back as well. Where number 3 is, there's a little Zen garden there, and the room that's near 3 looks into the Zen garden. And so that, again, is we've done it as, as minimum as possible to try to make things work. There is some, when you look at the existing home there's a few reasons too why we need to move north there, given some of that existing home is deteriorating, as you probably noticed in the photo. And so that's the other reason why we're pushing north there. So I think that's all.
So thank you. We look forward to your questions. We hope to get your support. This is, again, a property that is not livable by 3 major insurance companies right now. And we're hoping to be able to get this, going as quickly as we can, because just be very frank, it is not cheap to have a home in Evanston and be renting somewhere. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hillman, and thank you, Mr. Lamke, for your presentation. I have a couple questions for staff. So we've heard about yard issues. So the determination by, and I'm guessing this is by the zoning administrator, is that the red line on the right-hand side of this cheat sheet is what you're determining to be the front yard, and the angle on Poplar is the rear yard. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is considered a through lot since it has 2 street frontages. And typically through lots are treated as having 2 front yards. But there is a section within the zoning ordinance that says that if the rest of the block on that side of the street has treated one of the yards as a rear yard historically, then that should also continue. So in this case, since the houses just to the south, which are on the same block, it's very obvious that that's their rear yard. So the same was applied to both the old house that's currently on the lot and to the new proposal, where front yard is to the east, rear yard is to the west.
Okay, and so the building that we're seeing to the south here, which we just see the little kind of top hat thing sticking out of the bottom of the page there on Colfax. The front of that home, is that typical of the other homes along Colfax?
Yes, along Colfax, there's actually a building setback line that's shown on the plats of survey. It is not the city required setback line, but it's shown on the plat being 15 feet from the edge of the street line. And those existing houses follow that 15-foot line. So when you go to average out what the required front yard setback is, that's where we're getting that required number from. Now, in this case, our required number is being measured from the middle of the cul-de-sac, so it's a little odd. But the intent of the regulation is that everything's aligning roughly the same at 15 feet from the street. So the intent of the regulation would have been on this property to follow the curve of the cul-de-sac with a 15-foot setback from that, which would still trigger a variation, but that would be appropriate.
So the houses to the south of this, their property line does not go into Colfax Avenue, or is it street or avenue? It's terrace. I know it didn't sound right.
They do, but because it's not a cul-de-sac or not a full cul-de-sac at those parts, if you actually measure from their front property line to where their house is, it amounts differently, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I believe we came to the conclusion that the required front yard setback was 38 feet, I believe.
So regardless of what the required setback for the front yard is, in following the spirit of the ordinance, when we talk about it not being a 27-foot front yard, but taking the average of those, my indication would be, or my inclination would be, that the front of the house to the south would be the front buildable area of this property.
Correct. Definitely correct at the southernmost portion, and then theoretically it would follow the curvature of the cul-de-sac. So then the house could come somewhat closer to the street as you go further north.
Okay. I don't like following the cul-de-sac very well, because that makes it difficult to figure out what the dimension is, because it's different everywhere around that cul-de-sac. Okay, so with that, I'll ask Mr. Lamke, did you have a point to make? I saw your hand go up.
I did. It's just a small point, but the matching of the neighbors' yards to the south, the southern neighbors do not have an alley that they're dealing with as well. So matching the neighbors to the north seems a more appropriate match, because they have the same situation as the alley, et cetera. I mean, that's why I pointed out the garage is off of the alley, whereas our neighbors to the south, the garage is off of Poplar Avenue. So
Right.
That's why our lot matches the neighbor to the north more closely than the neighbor to the south.
Right,
I
but
mean,
I'm
it's-
looking,
it's-
I'm
it's
looking at the
curious.
fact that there is no front yard that is directly across the alley from you. So that's what I'm looking at when I'm interpreting this.
I'm sorry, I don't understand you. There's no front yard across the alley?
Yes, there is not another house that sits directly like yours with a side street coming into that alley.
Correct, but the neighbor to the north on the far upper left there,
Right, I understand
their front yard
that.
is the northern street, the east-west
Right.
street, right?
Right,
Correct. Okay.
right. Are there questions from commissioners on this? If you just raise your hand. Commissioner Lindahl?
Yeah, I just have a question about the materials. I couldn't quite figure out the fence along the alley. Are you proposing replacing it
We,
or maintaining it? The
a lot of,
existing fence.
right, it's a good question. A lot of this depends on architecturally what we can do. If we can achieve these setbacks at 3 and 8 and where that elm tree is, one of the things we're happy to remove that fence. Now, from a maintenance standpoint, the fence is kind of nice because it keeps things out of that space. But so we're a little flexible. We would like to keep replace the fence where its existing location to the east of the house on the alley, as well as in the upper left corner. Currently, the fence is on the alley where it meets Poplar, and then it also comes south on Poplar Avenue. And we were looking to possibly remove the fence that's along the sidewalk there on Poplar and just make it a little bit nicer.
Well, my question was, if you retain the existing fence, that's obvious. I was concerned about fence materials and fence height along the alley.
The fence height, I think the maximum is 6 foot high, so
Right.
we would only go to that height. I mean, that's
Okay.
not an issue.
All right, so the issue with respect to the 7.3 foot fence really relates to the wall along number 12. right?
Correct.
Is that correct? So there's not a request, either the fence along the alley stays, so there's not a request to change the fence necessarily along the alley.
Correct. We are absolutely not requesting any fence along the alley to be higher than really 5 or 6 feet.
Okay, but you're also open to retaining the fence that's
Well,
there.
we'd probably like to replace it, but
Right, but I mean, but it would be a 6-foot fence. So
right.
that's
And it might
not,
be correct.
that's not where you're requesting necessarily well, I guess there is the question of how far the fence extending into the front yard. So that's an issue.
Okay, so that brings us to where 11 is. So that fence, wall, we call it a wall, at number 12 extends on both sides of the 10 chimney, but we
Right.
stopped it short of the neighbor's front of their house. So it matches the front of the neighbor's house, the extent of that wall.
Okay, but the one along the alley, your proposal that extend, you replace the fences that exists into the cul-de-sac?
Correct, as it exists. Just keep,
If
just
that's- if
replace it and
that's-
upgrade.
and again, I think I'll ask the question of staff as to whether or not that would be allowed, or if that requires, if that's part of the variation request that's needed to extend.
That, just to be clear, we are certainly not asking for a height variation on the fence at the alley
Okay,
on the east portion of the thing. That would be a normal fence condition in
To
the location of the existing fence.
To clarify, the fencing specifically along the alley, the portion that is all adjacent to the house, that is compliant and could be replaced with a 6-foot fence of pretty much any style. Once you are within 3 feet of the front facade of the house, which staff is not calling the bicycle room the front of the house. If you look at elevations, we are calling it detached. So from the actual front of the main portion of the house, from there and then further east, since that's the front yard, fencing is not allowed above 4 feet unless it's approved by variation. In this case, because the cul-de-sac and front yard does abut the alley, my professional opinion would be that a 6-foot front yard fence in that location is appropriate.
Would it require then a variation? to
Yes.
grant? So that
Yes.
would, and is that part of this request?
It is. So
Okay.
it's noticed as the 7.3 foot fence height since that's the tallest one, but it
Okay.
does include the alley fence if they choose to go up to 6 feet.
Okay, and would that then be able to extend all the way to the property line or not? Or would it have to stop at the bicycle room?
It would either need to stop roughly at the thick red line, because that's what zoning staff is considering the
Okay.
front facade of the house. So 3 feet back from that, and then
Okay.
anything further east would need variation approval.
Okay, and that could be either the standard would be like a 4 foot or a 6 foot.
Correct. And there has been a precedent set with a cul-de-sac that dead ends with an alley behind it where a 6-foot fence in a front yard was allowed.
What do you, it looked like the neighbors maybe had a 6-foot fence along the alley. Is that, was I in one of the pictures, photos? I don't know, but
I think
yeah,
that's,
okay.
I think that's reasonable. We do have photographs of that, and there are some tall fences.
Yeah, well, not 7-foot ones, but 6-foot ones. Yeah, there's looking kind of right to the, to the red line. Is that your neighbor's fence or is that across the alley? I can't tell.
That is the neighbor's fence to our east, and
Okay,
so their fence goes to the property line, and we were just match that. I mean, currently both fences, as you can see, go to the property line.
okay. But that's where, the 6-foot fence could be
Correct.
granted under this. Okay. All right, thank you.
I think Commissioner Cullen had her hand up. She's put it down.
No, I was just gonna ask, what type of fence are we talking about? Is it gonna be a see-through one, like that white one that's over there, or is it a solid fence? I was just wondering.
I think we would prefer a solid fence, given the visual obstruction that we're trying to achieve, similar to the neighbors to the east.
Okay.
I have one, the other thing that I really couldn't tell is can you, or staff, can you describe the connection between the bicycle room and the main house? What does that look like? I couldn't really quite understand from the drawings.
That is a staircase that that goes from the second level to the basement. So it's our second exit from the basement. So it gives access for this bicycle utility room into the basement as well.
Okay, but the connection is then there like a covered walk, or is it just open?
Well, it's a 2-story staircase. So in a sense, there is a staircase above the lower staircase, yes. But there's no roof over the highest stair.
Okay.
Other questions from commissioners? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address us on 2356 Colfax Terrace? If you just raise your hand, please. I'm not seeing any hands going up. So I will ask Mr. Hillman if he'd like to make a summation before we close the record and begin deliberations.
No, I don't. Again, just thank you for your time and your considerations and your thoughtful inquiries.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hillman. With that, and seeing nobody from the public who wishes to speak, I will go ahead and close the record so that we can begin our deliberations. Are there any general thoughts from commissioners?
I'd like to speak.
Commissioner Halleck.
Yeah, when I first looked at this and the information we got, I thought, oh my gosh, so many variations, and why, So I kind of really got into this, and I don't think those, if you have not gone to the site and walked it and kind of pictured all these things, it's very difficult to understand. But having done that, I think this is a really, really good solution. And I think the fact that none of the neighbors have any objections, to this is significant, especially, since that's one of the critical things in meeting the standards. But I think this is a really clever scheme, and I would approve all the variations that are requested.
Commissioners?
Well, I also went out and I walked this site, and I can agree with Commissioner Halleck. You really do have to do that in order to understand the uniqueness of this property. I don't see another way that they could have solved it and made this usable. So I'm also in agreement with this proposal.
Commissioner Westerberg?
I think my only question or concern is just the taller fence at the south end of the property where it is so close to the neighbor. I'm not quite sure I understand the necessity for that, for the reason for that. I get the rest of it. I just question that.
If I can respond to that, I think what they're trying to do, there's no yard space on this site. I mean, what they're trying to do with this configuration, including the south wall, is to create some sort of open, accessible space. And I think as was explained, the floor is is above grade a couple feet. So that's why the fence is a little higher. I think the fence does two things. It gives this house some privacy, but if you also look at the house to the south, it actually benefits, I think, the house to the south, because they are, it gives them privacy. So I just thought that was logical and appropriate.
I say, to me, it's they're creating almost an outdoor room as opposed to use of the yard, right? So it's just, it just does, to me, it poses something very different in that small cul-de-sac and does stand out. Whether it's good or bad, I guess it's a little hard to tell from the plans.
And again, I think you have to go there and really imagine this and see how it would look next to the existing house to the south. And that's what I did. And that's what I thought was appropriate.
Other commissioners? I will just say that I disagree with lots of the previous comments. I think that I think there are different ways that this lot could be developed. I think that asking for this many variations and creating issues with large walls in the front yard create a problem for me. I see that this lot could easily be developed based off using the front of the existing house to the south to create a front yard there. Gives them space. I would much rather see that if this is a new development, be pulled off the alley towards the house to the south in order to make better use of that space. But I just think this is way too much for this particular lot. I think it's really pushing the boundaries of what I could find it. I mean, this goes beyond the boundaries of what I can find acceptable under our zoning ordinances. And looking at the fact that additional walls and fences are being built, a bicycle room is being added with this little strip. It reminds me of O'Hare, how O'Hare is connected to the city in order to make this an attached part of the house as opposed to a detached part of the house. You know, finding all the little cutouts and carve outs along the alley. Like I said, I would rather see the house pushed that way for development and not encroach into the front yard as much as it does. So that's my thoughts on this particular project. But I can't vote to approve this. Mr. Lamke, the record is closed currently. So I'm going to ask you to refrain from additional comments. Commissioner Puchtel.
I also am not in favor. I very much want this site to be redeveloped, and that's in keeping with everybody's goal. But in no way can I see that this is limited to the minimum, extent, the minimum change necessary to be in compliance. I'm kind of baffled that there aren't more diagonal lines. I'm concerned about energy efficiency with a much less compact floor plan. I'm concerned about the bicycle room being out near those two trees. That doesn't seem realistic that it would actually not harm the root structure. It just seems like they're pushing the boundaries in almost every way possible for a wide variety of goals that just seem unnecessary. So I'm not going to be in favor.
Any other commissioners have thoughts?
Yes, I do. A couple of them. I can see a number of the variations being acceptable. I am also troubled with 3 and 8. I believe that those, I'd rather see the building conform to the setback requirements in those 2 locations. With respect to the fence along 11, I know that's kind of iffy, but frankly, I think that if you want to do screening, a landscape treatment would be a much better approach. I am not in favor of the variation on the fence height. I think that's, while it creates a room, I think that it also creates a barrier while I don't think it's necessary. So, there's what we may want to do is kind of go through and see if some of the variations would be acceptable. But I'm in agreement. There are certain ones that I can't approve.
My response to that would be, I think that this is the proposal that has been shared with us, and to approve certain things and not others means that what they're trying to do here may not be able to be accomplished. I think some of them are pretty straightforward. I think number 11, asking for some sort of a vegetation screen instead of a fence. I think that's something that's very easily changed out. But I think some of the other issues like the bike room to the east of the house, saying, well, we don't approve of the bike room to the east of the house, that kind of changes their plan. So I would like to look at it kind of holistically. And we can give, as we move through standards, if there are certain things that people feel are good or are detrimental, we can give insight onto that, because if the project is denied, there's always a chance for the developer, or for the homeowner to come back with a different proposal. And we should probably give some guidance to that if we feel comfortable doing so. But I don't want to start nitpicking and pulling out things and saying, well, we approve this and we don't approve this, because it might impact the overall design in a way that makes it so it's not feasible altogether.
Okay.
Other commissioners that haven't spoken on this, I'd kind of like to hear from you on your thoughts.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, I'm generally with the nays on this one, just in a broad sense that there are, it's so much being asked. Just so many exceptions. So that's kind of my feeling, but I'm interested to hear from others.
Yeah, I did not have the opportunity to walk the site, but I am swayed by the fact that our two members of our commission who did have the opportunity to go out there, take a look at it carefully and thoughtfully, were sort of impressed with what they saw. And although I do share the concern that some of the commissioners have expressed in terms of the quantity and types of variations, I would be inclined on balance to support this, and particularly having heard the thoughts of two of our members who have actually been out to the site and seen it and tried to imagine it in real time.
Thank you, Commissioner Hugo. Anything else from any of the other commissioners before we go through standards?
I'm also a nay on the project. I think they need to think this through a little bit more, and maybe come up with a different, just a different plan, a different, try to see if they can minimize the amount of variations that they're looking for.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else before I go through standards? Hearing nothing. Again, the same standards we've been going through all evening are found in section 63812, which are the standards for a major variation. There are 7 of them. The first one being the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. I believe that this standard is met. The properties that would be most impacted by this, for the most part, are going to be the ones across the alley, and the neighbor to the south. The neighbor to the south has not raised any issues with having a 7 and 7.3 foot wall along, as well as a 20-foot fireplace chimney along their house. So I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the homeowners in this case and say that this standard is met. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. I think this project does not meet this standard. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to identify front yards, to include the green space along the front yards. I think that by imposing a bike room very close to the cul-de-sac, as well as building a wall and fireplace in the front yard, is not in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. So I don't believe that standard is met. I know some of you will disagree. So if somebody wants to chime in with a positive, I will let them do so at this point.
The only argument I would make is that this lot does not follow any of the any of the reasons why those rules, I think those rules are in place. This is such a unique lot. And like I said, if you have not been to this, I assure you, you do not understand, you know, what's going on here. But I think that this is, I just argue that this is so unique that the fact that there are several variations is a response to the uniqueness of the site.
Thank you.
But I think you can cover that in.
That's my comment on that.
You can kind of cover that in the third consideration. You can't argue that this is such a massive change that it is not in keeping with what the zoning ordinance really tries to do. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't recognize the hardships that you have with that property, but that this takes advantage of every conceivable loophole to make a difference, and that may not be in keeping with the zoning ordinance. That's
what
all.
I'm saying is I don't think the zoning ordinance addresses a site like this. That's what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
All right. We'll go on to standard number 3, which is the alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. I will again defer and say that this standard is met. This is a very unique property. I also went out to the property and viewed it. I make it a habit of trying to always hit every property, and I would encourage all commissioners to do so, because what we see on paper is not necessarily what you see in the real world. It is a unique property. And it does create difficulties in determining how something could be built here. But again, I don't think this is the right answer to the difficulty of the property, but I'm willing to concede that standard number 3 is met. Standard number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. I don't believe this standard has been met. I am willing to sway a little bit in terms of the strict letter of the regulations, in terms of where the front yard begins, things like that. But I really think that this is an overdevelopment of this particular lot, and I know others will disagree with me. And I will ask, since Commissioner Halleck and I seem to be the two who are discussing the standards back and forth, I will ask him to give his reasoning if he feels comfortable as to why this standard is met.
I've already said what I think my argument.
All right, I just wanted to give you the option in case you wanted to counter me on a particular issue.
I would also like to add that this lot is significantly larger than the minimum lot size for the R1 district. So I think that it is possible for the property owner to design a building that would fit better within the intent of the zoning ordinance.
But one of the reasons why I think why it's larger is because part of the site is in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, that's true. And I also
So
did
to me,
look at the
that's
site.
that's the reason why it's larger.
All right. Standard number 5, the purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property or the public benefit, which I'm not going to read because it's very lengthy. I believe that this standard is met. We have heard nothing basically saying that they're trying to build something to rent out space in this property or anything else to try to get income. They're trying to build a home that will meet the needs of their family and allow them to build the home the way they want to. But that does not relate to any way for trying to get additional income from the property. So I believe that standard has been met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship. I'm sorry, is there anybody who disagrees with me on that one? I don't think there's anybody who's disagreeing with me when I say yes on some of these. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. I believe this standard has been met. We've had testimony presented by the homeowner that this property has been kind of existing in this condition for, I don't remember if it was 50 or 60 years, but somewhere along those lines, many decades. And there's nothing that's been created on this lot by this homeowner that has created this hardship. So I believe that standard has been met. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation among the feasible options identified before this commission. I don't believe that this standard has been met. Again, going back to the fact that I think that when we're talking about the minimum, having to request 10, I think it's 10 variation requests, and I'm not always a fan of, sometimes you need to make requests in order to make properties work, but I have the feeling that some of these are above and beyond what we should be granting, in my opinion. I don't know if anybody wants to counter that one, other than to say Commissioner Halleck has already made his points, and so we'll leave it at that. Is there any further discussion on any of the standards? If not, I will ask Ms. Jones if she would please call the roll.
Do we have a motion?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm trying to get ahead of myself here. I will ask if there is a motion made by someone in the affirmative, preferably, to approve 22 ZMJV 0005 for 2356 Colfax with the, how many, Ms. Klotz, how many did we end up with variations total?
10 variations total.
10 variations, with the 10 variations that are listed in the staff memo. And with the fact that the construction and be in general, that the construction be in compliance with the testimony and documents submitted herein. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the project with the 10 variations proposed and per the testimony that's been given.
Thank you, Commissioner Halleck. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Lindwall seconds, so it's been moved by Halleck, seconded by seconded by Lindwall. Ms. Jones, now would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Rogers,
No.
Commissioner Pictel,
No.
Commissioner Hugo,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindwall,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Westerberg,
No.
Commissioner Cullen,
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Aravallo.
No.
So I count 6 no's and 3 yeses. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so on a vote of 6-3, the motion fails and the project is not approved. I would encourage the homeowner to talk to city staff, find out if there's a solution that is less impactful on the neighborhood and is more in keeping with the zoning ordinance, based on the comments you've heard from the commissioners this evening. So that concludes that case. I will make note of the time that it is 10:17. I don't remember what our rules say, but I believe at 10 o'clock we can decide not to hear new cases. But the only case we have remaining is for a text amendment. I don't think this is going to be horribly controversial. Maybe I'm wrong. So I'm going to say that we go ahead and hear the case unless somebody has a strong objection one way or the other. And hearing none, I will ask Ms. Klotz, I believe you are also handling this one, to read 22 PLND the text amendment into the record, please.
One second.
Do you have it?
Almost, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. 22 PLND 0007, a city-initiated text amendment to the zoning ordinance Title 6 of the City Code to modify parking requirements for medical office uses in existing structures and to change ground floor permitted office uses in non-residential and non-university districts to administrative review uses. The Land Use Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the determining body for this case per section 6346 of the Evanston zoning ordinance and ordinance 92-021. So this text amendment is proposed by staff, and it is due to a couple of things, and there are two primary parts to this text amendment. So the first part that comes up is parking requirement for medical offices. So currently the zoning ordinance has parking requirements when a new building is built. And then once that building is built, whatever parking was required is fine whenever the use changes. So if the use was a retail goods store and then it becomes a restaurant, there's no change in the parking requirement since you can't really add parking onto the property. However, there are a few identified uses where it does trigger an additional parking requirement. For instance, if you are adding dwelling units, that triggers an additional parking requirement since you really are increasing that parking demand. So another one that triggers the additional parking requirement is medical offices. That is for medical offices in nearly all zoning districts. It basically doesn't apply in the downtown since there are parking garages, and it doesn't apply in industrial districts since there are large parking lots throughout. So in all other places, anytime a medical office wants to locate, they come to city staff. We recalculate what the parking requirement is, which is a substantial burden just to figure out what that is. We have to look at historic documents and how many additions were made to the building, etc. And once we determine that new parking requirement, people have to go hunting for additional parking that's within 1,000 feet of the site. A lot of times that's not that big of a deal. But when you're talking about COVID test sites, for instance, it becomes a problem. And so what has happened is those COVID test sites are only able to locate in certain parts of the city. We could get a ton of them in the downtown right now because there is no parking requirement there. But generally speaking, anywhere in the Main and Chicago Business District, Dempster and Chicago Business District, and Central Street Business District, because of the parking requirement itself, it's just not an option. So staff proposes to simply eliminate that extra parking requirement and just go with the existing original parking requirement that exists for each property, just like it is for most other uses. However, we do recognize that there are certain medical offices that should have an increased parking demand, and we don't necessarily just want that to be a free-for-all. So that leads to part 2 of the text amendment. And part 2 is to make ground floor offices, that would be medical offices and non-medical, and make those into administrative review uses. Currently, they are permitted. So currently, zoning staff has no say in where ground floor offices are locating other than an existing regulation that we already have. So for instance, in most of the downtown right now, those could all be scooped up by ground floor offices. And then we are going to have ground floor offices that can change ownership and continue to be offices for many, many more years. So that may not be the greatest thing for a business district to do. When the administrative review uses were established 1 year ago, we did make ground floor offices that at that time had a special use requirement. We made that into an administrative review use requirement. That was specifically in the business district overlays. So essentially, those business districts are already protected and have had some ground floor offices approved when it's appropriate, and others told that it's not appropriate. But that regulation is already in place and is working well in those areas. So this is simply adding on to that so that the entire city basically is on an even playing field. With that said, staff acknowledges that if a large, say, medical office wanted to come in and requested an administrative review use, staff would not want to determine that ourselves. I would not want to. Instead, as it is allowed per the zoning ordinance, I would kick it to the special use process so that it still goes through committee and potentially parking could be added in as a condition. That is the general gist of it. I'm sure there are questions.
Questions from commissioners? Anyone? There are no questions.
Well, I will just make a comment. I'm glad to hear that the administrative review is working well. Have there been any real issues? I mean, just generally?
There have really not been issues. It's working extremely well. We have not formally denied any uses, but I'm going to say there's probably 10 or so that inquired with me, and I said that I would not be comfortable recommending approval, and so they looked elsewhere and found more appropriate locations. So I really do think it's doing exactly what we intended for it to do.
Okay. And, I guess the other comment is that, presumably if we're, winding down in the pandemic, you won't have more COVID testing sites that need to have locations. But I think that with the changes in how, medical offices seem to be operating, where they really are not, they don't want patients hanging around in waiting rooms these days. So I think it makes sense to make this change. Generally.
Other comments from staff, or I'm sorry, from commissioners? I'll just say that, I mean, we hire staff, we expect them to do the right thing. So I'm fine with giving a little more discretion to staff and these sorts of issues. And I think that we have the fail safe of, if there are things that are large issues or particularly programmatic, I think our staff also is wise enough to direct those on to us as a special use, or in some other way to help them find. It sounds like we've already had cases where people have come and said, I want this, and they've been told, yeah, that's going to be a special use because of what you're looking for, and they find a more suitable location. So I think that is indicative of the fact that this is working. Any other comments from commissioners? If not, I'll ask if there's anybody from the public who wishes to speak on this. To raise their hand. I only see a few people left. I don't see any hands going up. So with that, we have, and I don't have these standards. So if someone, if these are the 5 standards, is that correct, that are in the memo that I have to go through? I'm seeing a shaking head. Yes. So for the standards and conditions here, the first one is the use shall not cause a negative cumulative effect on surrounding properties or the immediate neighborhood. Again, I'll just say, I think that having staff, we trust our staff to make these decisions, that if it will be a particularly large impact on a neighborhood, to send those through the special use process where they can be more thoroughly vetted. So I believe that standard has been met. Number two, the use shall not interfere with or diminish the value of properties in the area. Again, I think this kind of helps streamline the process somewhat for some of these, and make sure that we're taking into account all the issues that will impact the properties and their surrounding properties. So that standard has been met. Number three, the use shall not cause undue traffic or parking congestion or noise. I think this one's kind of where we really kind of are focused. And again, I would say that, you know, being able to make accommodations in some of our non-downtown neighborhoods makes sense. And again, staff knowing kind of where the line is on when they need to bring something to a special use versus being able to make the administrative decision, I think is fine. This standard has been met as well. The use shall comply with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan. You know, I think that we're going to continue to look at the parking requirements. I mean, we've had several parking cases already. We had one earlier this evening. Parking is always going to be an issue here. And hopefully when we start moving through with our new comprehensive general plan, it will also take a look at how the world has changed since 2000 when our last comprehensive general plan was written. And so I believe that this standard is met, and the use shall be appropriate when considering the surrounding vacancy rate, public health concerns, which I believe is a new line that's been added into the standard here, and other nearby uses. And again, I think that you know, when we're looking at the medical buildings in particular, and I mean, I know we're focused heavily on COVID-19, but hopefully in the next few months to year, we will not have to have testing sites all over the city, but we still will be looking at different types of medical uses. And as was raised earlier, you know, the fact that medical offices do not want people just sitting around in waiting rooms for hours. They want people basically to come in, go right to an exam room, come right back out, would make the need for parking a little more interesting and responsive to these individual properties. So I think that standard is met as well. Is there anybody who has any different findings for those? Hearing none. I will ask, there's some guiding conditions here, but those are really more for staff, I believe, than for us to be looking at. Is that correct, Ms. Klotz?
Yes, those are the guiding conditions that are codified within the zoning ordinance to help staff make the determinations on the administrative review uses.
All right, thank you. With that, I will ask if there's a motion, again, noting that this is a recommendation to City Council since it is a change to the zoning ordinance through the text amendment process. Is there a motion for 22 PLND 0007? Anyone?
Sure, I'm gonna misstate it. So Chair Rogers, I hope I move approval of the proposed text amendment and recommend that it be forwarded on to the City Council.
Okay, and just for clarification, this is the office and medical uses stated in 22 PLND 0007.
That's correct.
Moved by Lindwall. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Westerberg. Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Rogers,
Yes.
Commissioner Pictou,
Yes.
Commissioner Hugo,
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Cullen,
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck,
Yes.
and Commissioner Aravallo.
Yes.
So with a vote of 9-0, the text amendment for office and medical uses will be forwarded on to the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council for their consideration. That concludes our cases this evening. We have discussion item. There's one thing about returning to in-person meetings. I don't know who's addressing that.
Yeah, that's kind of an FYI, and then also trying to get a little bit of feedback from the commissioners regarding your thoughts and feelings on returning to in-person meetings beginning in April, being that certain mandates are being lifted, and just the general trend we're seeing towards opening things back up.
Is it mandatory?
This is discussion, so nothing, nothing at this point I believe is mandatory, but should certain orders expire and not be extended, then that could be a question that arises, or it may not be something for discussion anymore.
I think since we're looking at going, sorry, Commissioner Halleck, to step on you,
If
but
we did get back together, would this be no masks? Or is that a question too?
I think that would probably also be a question, being that I think in some places like Chicago, come Monday, the mandates are being lifted. We'll have about a month because the next couple of meetings will be remote. They've been noticed that way. And that's what that's going to be. So we'll have a month to see what happens once things are not mandatory and people are a little bit more able to move about how they want to. This may very well be something that we revisit in March.
Yeah.
Once we see what's
Looked
going on.
like the notice I just got from the city, I think our mask and vaccine, I think the proof of vaccine in restaurants and stuff goes away Monday as well.
Yes.
Yeah, the mayor did, there was an email blast from the mayor's office today regarding vaccine and mask mandates. We can maybe send that to everyone if there are members that aren't subscribed.
But I think, you know, we all have to be vaccinated as commissioners anyway, is that, I think, or at least that or test, so.
I mean,
I'm okay with meeting in person, I think.
I'm great with it, actually.
I mean, I would like to meet in person. It's very difficult to run Zoom meetings with a bunch of different people all over the place and looking for hands and everything like that. And I will say that, you know, even after the mask mandates have expired, I will continue to wear a mask in public for quite a while until I'm sure that we are not going to have a rebound here. And that's because, you know, I mean, I have a compromised immune system, so I'm going to do what's right. And I would hope that anybody who wants to wear a mask would feel comfortable doing so if we do meet in person. I have no issue with that.
Does the commission have the ability to ask the public also wear masks? I mean, it's like the lifting the mandate and all that stuff, but is there businesses still can continue to require it? I'm going to require it in our Rotary building.
I don't know that we as a public entity of a public organization, as in the city, have the ability to make any requests like that.
No, we can, it can't be mandated by the city once the mandate has been lifted by the mayor.
Right. And since we're not a private organization, we have to follow what the governor and everybody on down the line says.
And we're talking April anyway, right?
Right. I mean, we're a month out from this, so it's not like we're going to be meeting again in 2 weeks with the and going right into it. So I think
Yeah, I would prefer that if we're going to meet in person, we meet in person and not try to do a hybrid sort of
Yeah.
situation, because that I find is very, very challenging.
So does that give you some guidance, Ms. Jones?
Yes, it does.
Real quickly, it's not here, but I know that we also had talked about our meeting on the 23rd of next month. It being spring break for schools, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. And I did send an email out asking who would be available on the 23rd or the 30th. And at this point, it's looking like the 30th would be better. So
Okay. All right. And
I
then
think we can expect to have the meeting on the 30th instead.
Good.
And then one last thing that's not on here, Commissioner Halleck reached out to me about us all getting together on a social basis at some point when people feel somewhat comfortable with that, so we can get to know each other, since many of us have never met. And I think I've been in, well, I was in a few public meetings when the Plan Commission, and then we went back to remote. So I haven't even talked to all the former plan commissioners in person, really. So that's something to keep in mind. I think it would be beneficial for us. The only requirement is, of course, we cannot discuss business. So we can talk socially, but we can't talk about cases or general thoughts or that sort of thing, which would be nice probably anyway. So I hate to sort of throw something onto Miss Jones, but I will. If she could just sort of help, you know, again, I don't know when people feel comfortable. Maybe when we go back in person in April is the time to do that. And look at maybe getting together socially for a drink or something like that to just kind of say hello to everybody in person and get to know each other by more than just a little screen on our computers.
Weather might be better in April anyway.
Yes, yes.
I was just going to add that if anybody knows of an appropriate venue, like a bar that has a little private zone, or, you know, that'd be ideal, I think. So we're separated but not separated.
Right.
That'd be great. So if you have any suggestions, suggest.
Yep. So we'll look for something. What does do we know what our cases look like in April yet?
Not yet. There are things that are generally in the pipeline, but it really isn't a matter of waiting for people to submit things or updates and things like that. So,
all right. Any other topics of our discussion? I see only one person from the public who's here. I don't know if they would like to make any comments to us under the public comment section. But I don't see a hand or them unmuting or anything, so I'm going to assume that's a no. So I will ask now if there is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Fuchtel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Johnson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we stand adjourned. I will see everybody on what's our next meeting?
March 9th.
March 9th.
You have one agenda item.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
thanks, everyone.